Do you ever wonder what chefs eat at home? You know, I can imagine that they probably make some really amazing dishes from time to time, but if they're anything like the rest of us, sometimes they maybe just want some toast and cheese. I've been talking to a lot of people inside the industry that are around whiskey all the time. All the time. Not like us, not like drinking in the evening and at weekends and at events. All the time they're around whiskey. So I want to try and discover, what do these guys choose to drink? I've missed you all, and I'll see you in a second. Hello, everyone. Hello, whiskey folk. I'm just realising Greg's Whiskey Guide is suggesting that I'm a wee bit blurred tonight. I hope I am not blurred. I hope, Greg, my friend in Paris, I hope it is just you. Anyway, hello, whiskey folk. Welcome, everybody. I apologise at the outset that I've not been here for the last couple of weeks. As you know, I've been off on whiskey travels, like down to Campbelltown, and thereafter I went off to Islay, and we had an absolutely fantastic time. As you know, it was 2 years delayed. You know, there was a lot of pent-up desire to get on this whiskey trip, but we managed to extend it and push it out and make it more than it would have otherwise been. And we've done a lot of work. We were exploring these distilleries in a much, much deeper way, and we managed to learn a lot of stuff that we otherwise didn't learn. Right at the outset, Jimmy's given me a wee dram, and he said, I bet we've missed you more than you've missed us. Jimmy, I think you might be surprised, my friend. I had a wonderful time away. I really, really did. But when it got to Thursday night on the drive down to Campbelltown, there was an anxiety there. And then Thursday night last week as well, I was thinking, because all we needed to do a vPub from Islay was a data connection, and we couldn't get it. We couldn't get a stable 4G connection in the accommodation that we were in. There was Wi-Fi there, but it was just so poor. The speed was so poor, it would not have been able to accommodate a live stream. So very early in the week, I just kind of decided, look, okay, we're not going to make this happen. And then I just relaxed a wee bit. But Jimmy, thank you very much for your dram, and thanks for missing me too. I missed you as well, my friend. Cheers. What I was thinking about, though, is that, and Bill has bought me a dram as well. It's been too long since I have bought you a dram, my friend. Cheers. Bill, you never need to buy me drams. Just you hanging out with me and all your support over the years is more than enough. But, buddy, thank you very, very much. Cheers to you, Bill Monteith. Thank you. What I've worked out is that it's not just a dynamic about me missing hanging out with you on a Thursday night or you guys missing the vPub. I think what I've worked out is that there's an element of you missing each other. You know, when you arrive here every Thursday night, so many of you have got to know each other as friends. And if there isn't a vPub, if I'm not sitting behind this seat, it means that there's no place for you to go. And I'm kind of half thinking that I should just maybe set up a live stream and just press the go live when I'm not here and just let you guys hang out for a couple of hours. See how that goes down. I'm only kidding, but it's a good idea, right? Lee J. Brown is saying, evening, Roy, and all the barflies. Great to see you all. Fantastic for your dram. Cheers to you, Lee J, as well. So yes, we were working during this trip. There were people from Dramface there coming along to just understand deeper things about the industry, about the individual distilleries, what differentiates them, all of the dynamics that goes on behind the scenes in whiskey. So it was a fantastic time. But I'm not going to dwell and talk too much about what we got up to on that trip. What I will do publicly is just read out my thanks to the people that just went out of their way to accommodate us and host us in such a welcoming and friendly and professional way. And that was David, Nicole, Fiona, and the team down at Springbank, which teed things up for the 10 days ahead wonderfully well. It was amazing. And then we went up to Glen Scotia down in Campbelltown to see Ian McAllister and the team as well. Fantastic day in Campbelltown. Then we went over to Islay across the course of the weekend, and on Monday we started at Lagavulin where Ian and Jordan looked after us. And a trip to Lagavulin is always a treat, and it was fantastic there. Then Anthony looked after us at Colholm. Anthony and the team, thank you all so much for your amazing hospitality and your welcoming nature. It was wonderful. Thanks for the amount of time you spent with us too. Then it was Billy Sinclair and Ross and the team down at Lefroy as well. We had a great day at Lefroy. What a wonderful bay that is, just to stand and soak up the atmosphere. Almost every time I'm at Lefroy Bay, it's just this kind of calm, peaceful place. I want to be there one day when it's a bit rough and blowy. It would be nice to see. I want to say thanks to Paul and Fraser. An amazing time that we had at AnCnoc Distillery. My goodness, you guys are in for a treat when AnCnoc finally stretches its wings and shows you what it's all about. I can't wait. We got to try AnCnoc malt at 3.5 years old, and it was very, very good. Then it was David and the team that hosted us down at Bunnahabhain, just up at the very top northeast of Islay. Fantastic, David. Thank you so much for your hospitality and your good humour, my friend. And then we went to, on the last day, we went to Colin and Jackie and the team looked after us at Ardbeg. Fantastic time there, seeing the developments there, how they've managed to almost perfectly duplicate their still house to deal with the expansion and just spend a nice time at Ardbeg. And we finished off with Fraser looking after us at Brookladdy. So that was 10 proper deep dive tours that we did while we were away, but we visited 14 distilleries in all. It was a busy little time. But like always with these things, you go for the whiskey and you end up enjoying the people. So I'll raise a glass to everybody that looked after us in the last couple of weeks and say thank you all for your time. Cheers. Before I go rattling on about tonight's topic, let's just do it. Let's just jump straight into the lounge and welcome some of you beautiful whiskey folk and dedicated barflies. I can see that there's lots of colour bands coming up for me to catch up on. Legie, I did get your dram. Thanks very much. David Evans is saying good to have you back, and he's celebrating being a Barfly member for 28 months. So David has got his pink Barfly. David, and anybody that joins the Barflies, if you're on a desktop, there's a join button underneath this video. You can join the Barflies. You get access to loyalty badges like David and colourful emojis and things, whiskey-related, channel-related emoji. But the most important thing that you do is sustain the channel in some way. It's a small way, but it means that I never need to monetize the channel. You more than pay for the ad revenue I would have otherwise earned. So thank you, David, for your support over the last 28 months, my friend. We've also got Watchman999. That's Greg. I'm sure it's Greg, isn't it? He's celebrating being a member for 24 months. Lucky number 13 makes me crave Craigellachie. I wonder what you've got in the glass, Greg. Whiskey with Molly's been a member for 10 months, and he's saying you are very blurry, Roy. Ooh, let me see. I am pixelated on the live, but on my camera here, it's clear. The blur is nothing to do with my camera. It's pixelation. It's probably to do with bandwidth. I'm not sure what I can do there. I checked everything before I went live, as I mostly often do. We just need to work with it. Listen, I don't need to look super sharp, do I? As long as you can hear me okay, Ben. Anyway, thanks very much for your being a member for the last 10 months. As well as Jesse Artinsalo, he's a member for 7 months, and he's saying, Altmore 18 in my glass. Good for you, Jesse. A very nice one too. Dribs and Drams from Canada, he's saying, hi there. The return of the vPub is a bit of a chat with the barflies. Absolutely. Here's to that too. Highland Hamish is saying, greetings from Inverness, folks. Looking forward to maybe seeing some of you at Inverness Whisky Festival this Saturday. Oh, wow. Inverness Whisky Festival is this Saturday. Hamish, I bet that would be a cracking one to go to. Dribs and Drams, thank you. And Hamish, thanks very much for your drams. Cheers. Danny Hebbington as well. You star, Danny. Good to see you in, my friend. Good to welcome you back. He's saying, welcome back, my friend. Looking forward to all the tales. Yeah, I was going to mention how I'm going to share the tales from the weekend. The best, I've got a guest on tonight, and this guest has been scheduled since, I think, March or April or something ridiculous like that. So I didn't want to bump this for on the back of the trip. What I'm going to do is I'm going to have a lock-in on Sunday evening with patrons. So I'll be able to share all the tales and wee anecdotes and things like that, everything that we got up to over the trip, and just have a relaxed night with patrons on Sunday night. It was a good trip, and I'll find ways of sharing it through all the content over the coming months. It's not really deserving of a dedicated Thursday night vPub session, I think. Anyway, it's wonderful that you're all back here, and hopefully looking forward to hanging out with me to have some. I had a discussion with somebody recently on the back of having the exact same discussion a couple of days before with somebody else, and it seems to be a common theme. And the theme kind of goes, I just want to address this now, it goes along the lines of, Roy, I think the channel would be doing a lot better if you did more short form content. Now, I get that, I understand that completely. Most of our culture, certainly digital consumption today, is about short form. The snappier, the quicker, the better. Everybody has it. You know, Facebook has their videos, their short videos. Instagram has their reels. TikTok, my goodness, I don't even want to touch it. My kids are obsessed with TikTok. And even YouTube now has its shorts. And everybody's kind of gone after this short form content, which was already a shortening or a shortening of what was already quite short on YouTube. You know, the most popular punchy content on YouTube tends to be pretty short videos. That's not what I'm trying to do. It's never been what I'm trying to do. There are arguments for doing shorter content, shorter form content for recycled reviews and things like that. But the vPub is the exact antithesis of that. It's the opposite of that. It's about taking time with each other, with friends, with a glass of whiskey, the way that whiskey teaches us to slow down a wee bit. What I'm trying to build is not a channel. It's not likes and subscribers and all of that stuff. What I'm trying to build, and I think everybody's worked this out, is community. And that means slowing down and spending a bit of time and getting to know each other. However, if you are here and you don't have, however, you've looked at the timeline on this video and realized that it's another 2 hours, 2.5 hours plus, whatever it's going to be tonight, it's the vPub, we don't care. However long it is, you'll realize that there's chapter markers in the timeline. If you're watching this on the replay, you'll be able to pick it up and skip ahead to the things that interest you. I'll stay up late tonight and I'll do my homework and my housekeeping, sorry, so that you're able to do that as soon as YouTube allows that function to happen for me. This is the vPub. We just want to take things a wee bit easier. Jeff Whiskey is suggesting that I turn it off and on again. Am I still blurry? I am. Do you know what? I mean, I could drop out and come back in again. I could do that. I am connected through the cable. I know I am because I checked the speed beforehand. I could, if I switch off the Wi-Fi, nothing should happen. If I disappear, I'll be back again. And hopefully I'm back. Okay, that might have helped a wee bit. It looks like the Mac, probably an update, has maybe tried to go through Wi-Fi. You can let me know if that's made any difference, if I'm any sharper at your side. Let's see. Max is saying, yep, he was on Wi-Fi. So frustrating. I've got the Mac configured that it prioritizes the cable as soon as it goes in. The trouble is that you update things, and the settings are, it's a bit better, Roy says, Greg. Looks better. Yeah, Ben Welding is saying bingo. Okay, we should have sharpened things up a wee bit. Thanks for your guidance as always. It's ridiculous, isn't it? You would think they would be good at this stuff by now. Anyway, I'm looking forward to hanging out on Sunday night with any patrons that are available on Sunday night. And for the rest of you, for anybody else, what we learned over the last couple of weeks and all the wee stories and anecdotes will be something to help enrich and colour all the vPubs and all the content and everything that we all put together going forward. It was a fantastic time. Doc joined us. He's in here tonight. He's saying, we have enough hectic and high-speed things happening every day. Slowing down in the evening is the right thing to do. I know that you get it, Doc, because you've been here for a long, long time now, buddy. And we had a good time, didn't we? Eagle Castle is saying, is it possible to change streaming time and day maybe sometimes? You know, that's an interesting one, because the only time that I go live at 10:15 is because that was the first ever vPub went live at 10:15. And the feedback I got was that it was a good time to catch a lot of people in North America, but also still a decent time for people in Europe. Now, I appreciate that a lot of people in continental Europe are at least an hour ahead. So it's pretty late for them. But, you know, when something is When something is just working and it's ticking by, don't mess with it. So there are occasions that I do live streams at a different time of day, Eagle Castle, but the regular vPub will probably continue to go out at this time. I know it doesn't suit everybody all the time, but I hope that that's where the replay can help people out, pick up what they can live and pick up the rest on replay. As if perfect time. And Andrew from Australia drops in to say, good morning, mate. To prove the point. Absolutely perfect. No Rolex is saying, I like Thursdays, I like routine. Perfect. We have Thursdays and we have routine. Let's pick up some comments before I welcome in my guest and talk to you about the topic tonight. Pete Head is in saying, I see you soon then. Fantastic, Pete Head. But it worked out okay. Prefer the chilled long approach, says Helen. Here for the community and friendship of this amazing group of like-minded people. Fantastic. I agree with that, Helen. Superb. Greg's Whiskey is saying, very brave of you, Roy, to put those timestamps all the time. I do it more and more for my long videos, so know how long it is. I know it takes a long time, doesn't it, Greg, to scrub through afterwards and find the cut points. But if people get a benefit out of it, it's kind of worth doing. Jimmy Jazz is saying, let Stuart try to sell us something. Stuart from our guest tonight. I think you might be surprised at the lack of selling. Jimmy Legacy saying, sound is fine, no need to drop off. Okay, Jimmy, you didn't need to see me, but hopefully you're seeing me. Let's check the health of the stream. I think it's a bit better, isn't it? Whiskey Radar saying there have been so many new distilleries and brands emerging over the last years. Maybe a pronunciation guide number 3 could be a cool option for a short content video. I did think about it, Roland. Bunnahabhain give us enough content to put out a dedicated video in its own right, don't they? But there's more coming around all the time. What was it called? Ullevest is the new Inverness distillery. So it's not just brands and distillery names and expressions, is it? It's whole new names that's coming out of the blue that we've never ever heard or seen before. Apparently, it's Gaelic for monster. And some people are saying it's better. Everything looks better. Good stuff. Doc is saying tech is perfect now. Thank you, Doc. And Callum Craigie is in. Good to see you, Callum. Good evening, Roy. Good to see you back. It's great to be back, Callum. And Anthony Lambert is saying, could you maybe do every second Thursday in the mornings? That would fit with my shift system at work. I wouldn't miss so many then, Anthony. Terrific. Thursday mornings drinking whiskey. I could be tempted. But let's stick to the vPub just the way it is for now. And I see how we go on with it. But it's brilliant to welcome you all in. It's fantastic to be back again. I genuinely have missed you. Let's get on with tonight's topic. I've got an interesting dram in the glass tonight, but it's going to align with one of the drams that my friends brought along. So I'll talk about it a wee bit later, but I'm really surprised at how much peat there is in it. And this is coming from somebody who's just been on Islay for a week, drinking peaty whiskies, and often misses the peat. But I seem to be sensitized to peat this evening because I've got another bottle here that just got delivered today. You can probably tell by the neck of this bottle what it is. But I've opened it just to let it air a bit, and I could smell that there was peat on this. And I'm surprised I didn't know that this was a peaty dram. Anyway, the whole reason for this topic that I've come up with tonight, and I can see it being a little bit of a theme. I can see if it works tonight, I might want to push it going forward, because there are fantastic, enthusiastic people out there that are truly whiskey geeks. Some of them even hang out in the chat and in the lounge with you guys and watch from time to time too. They're impassioned and they love the fact that they work in whiskey. And they love whiskey, and they're knowledgeable about whiskey. And the things that they understand and know about whiskey is not the same as what we know and understand, because they see it from a different perspective. They're constantly in touch with customers, so they see the customer perspective, but they're constantly in touch with the production and marketing, sales and admin side, so they see it from that side as well. So there's a real value to speaking to these people. However, especially if you've got an independent outlet like I have here on the Aquavitae channel, something like Dramface, whatever it may be, as soon as you know or anybody becomes aware that it's somebody that's involved in promoting a particular brand, you know, the defensive shackles go up a little bit. And I've been guilty of that too. And then you speak to these people and you say, my goodness, these guys, it's like speaking to a pal about whiskey. They're in their dream job, actually, and they love whiskey. And the discussions that I have tend not to be about a simple, plain information exchange. Very, very quickly it gets into a quite heated, excited, enthusiast type whiskey exchange. Have you tried? What did you think about this? And how does this come about? I realized that that's the kind of discussion that we need to bring into the vPub in some way. So all of these brand reps, brand ambassadors, salespeople, tour guides, whoever they are, the ones that are impassioned and enthusiastic, there could be a formula where we come on and say, well, okay, let's talk us through what you drink. So I've got 5 categories tonight that I'm going to ask my guest to put forward a whiskey for. The first one is the topic that we covered at the last vPub that I did, the permashelf one, which was a bit of an odd topic to do, permashelf, but at the concept of staples. What's a staple that's always on the shelf? By the way, thanks to everybody that watched that video. That's done almost 9,000 views. It might be because there wasn't vPubs in between, but to give you an idea, that's almost the performance of a recycled review. Quite incredible. So I really appreciate it. Thank you. But I've asked him to put forward a whiskey for that, an always on hand permashelf type whiskey. I've also asked him to put forward what he would pour as a crowd pleaser. So he's got a mixed room of people and he's got to pour a whiskey that could potentially keep everyone happy. What would he choose? And remember, all of these has to be things that are personal favorites of his, things that he loves himself. Then I've asked him to pick his decadent dram, his decadent pick, something that's cost him a wee bit more money. He's had to push the boat out for, but he knows it's something special and he's going to be pouring a treat either for himself or a guest. And then next up would be a VIP pour. Now, this can be something that's super interesting, super obscure, super rare, super special, something that somebody's going to have to sit down and study and take their time with. VIP being probably another whiskey geek. What would you pour for somebody that you wanted to say, wow, I think this is interesting? What would be your VIP pour? And finally, we're going to round off with a big, bold, brash flavor bomb. What would you pick that's going to be one of these drams that every sip you're not going to be able to stay in the conversation because the whiskey is going to be screaming for your attention? That's the 5 categories that we're going to sip through tonight. Tom Elmer is saying, I'm just wondering why when whiskey makers will have to add a fuel surcharge to the cost. It's already happening, Tom. It really is. Malt Brother Ray is saying, would you accept a job as a brand ambassador if you had to give up the vPubs? Ray, not a chance. Really not a chance. These guys work really, really hard. They work a lot of hours. They're constantly on the road. I was constantly on the road for 20 years of my life, and I'm not ready to do that again. I'm very happy sitting behind the bar, hanging out with you guys. My life has worked out pretty perfectly in that sense, Ray. So no is the answer to that. Andrew is saying, I would love to see you interview Australian distillers reps in the future. Aye. Do you know the only difference with that, the only difficulty with that is that it's nice to talk to folk that we can actually get our hands on the stuff, Andrew. And I know that you down there in Australia are having difficulty getting a hold of your own stuff, let alone getting anywhere widely distributed in the Northern Hemisphere. But I like the way you think. I like the idea. Kilted Moose Scotty's in. Good to see you, buddy. Hope you're keeping well. Fantastic. North Coast Drammer Tony. That looks like a new name, Tony. Welcome in. He's joined the Barflies. And I think I've maybe not welcomed you before, Tony, so it's nice to have you in. So you might remember my guest tonight has been on a previous vPub. That was in a previous role when he worked for Douglas Laying. When he worked for Douglas Laying, I brought him in and I wanted to simply ask him, what's the story with blended malts? Why would you blend single malt whiskey? Why would you mix them together in order to make a blended malt? And we talked at length about that idea that maybe blended malt should have more distinction between blends and blended malt. It should just be called malt whiskey. And then we can further define single malt using that signal qualifier, that single qualifier. Just refer to it as malt whiskey. And then we talked about why blended malts exist, what they're good for, what they do well, and all of those great things. Since then, he's moved organization, and very recent times, he's moved across to one of our favorite producers, if we're honest. If you consider the whiskies that we talk about in the vPub at length, very recently, Speyburn's been talked about at length, but one of the staples and one of the favorites is AnCnoc from Knockdo Distillery. He's also responsible for Balblair, for Old Pulteney, and for Balmainac too, as well as Hankey Bannister, Cato's, and other blends as well. So he's in a new role now. So coming forward this time, I think he's probably got a wider experience, having had that independent bottler background, then back into distilling and manufacturing production of whiskey, let's say. And that's why I've thought that this would be a good topic to involve Stuart. So without further ado, Scott McIntyre is saying, evening Roy, currently sipping a Coquerrin cast strength port on a holiday in Quinta do Lago. I can't think, Scott, of a better whiskey to be sipping if you're out there in Quinta do Lago. My goodness, a big, bold flavour like that Coquerrin cast strength port. And Peter Hunt is saying, Stuart is now one of the best guys in whiskies I know. Looking forward to hearing how he's getting on. Oh, he's got a fan already. So let's reach in let's get a wee thumbs up from Stuart. He's got a smile on his face. So you obviously heard that. You've got a fan in. Peter Hunt's here. He's
far too generous, Peter. It's far too generous, but thank you very much.
Stuart, it's nice to have you back here on the vPub as well. Thanks very much for stepping forward. And I have to be honest, I'll say at the outset, this is not, I didn't ask this of you. It's just been obvious from the beginning that this is an Ask Us Anything session. So if anybody wants to chime in and ask Stuart questions about anything, about his own portfolio of products and beyond, it's absolutely fine for all of it. It's going to be as open as possible tonight. But welcome, buddy. It's nice to have you back again.
It's an absolute pleasure. I love how you affectionately referred in the blurb to me as a guinea pig. That was great for this. I
did. Did you read that? Did you?
Oh, I read it. Of course, I read it.
I did refer to you as a guinea pig, and I think it's I need to have more confidence in these kind of new formats, these new ideas. But I think you get what I'm talking about, right? When you do the circuit, as you guys like to call it, when you're going around the festivals, the gigs, the tastings, and things like that, you're constantly in collaboration or working alongside your peers, right? And it's not everybody. Let's not say everybody's really into their whiskey. That's not true. But so many of them are impassioned geeks, right? Would you self-refer as a geek?
Yeah, it's genuinely true. And I think anyone that steps into an ambassador role is, if you step into this role without a genuine love for whiskey, or specifically even the whiskies that you're going to represent, and your credibility just goes down the drain. Because, realistically, anyone that's personable and extroverted and is good at making friends could realistically do this role. But as soon as you show a kink in the armor to the Barflies, to anyone, and to the vPub, it shows very, very clearly that you're not.
Sincerity is difficult to fake, isn't it?
It really is. It really is. And the funny thing is, as you say on the circuit, see at the end of the day when we're all cleaning up, see the bottle swaps that go on.
Yeah.
I've got a great photo of Jamie Morrison from Glenturret coming back with about 6 bottles from different stands, and him running around with Glenturret elite bottles.
Well, that's encouraging to hear right at the beginning, because I think that, especially when it's brands from your own product, you must get a lot for free, right? So that it's, a lot of the times, unless you're getting a bottle swap, you're actually being asked to spend money where you otherwise don't need to try other whiskies that are out there, right?
Yeah, you are. But I think when you're on the circuit and you know individuals on the circuit, you can walk around and say, "How's it going? What have you got?" And it's not always the under the shelf bottle. It is something that you think that you're going to enjoy or they find very interesting. It's not like we walk up and it's the £1,000 bottle under the shelf. It's genuinely something that they want. Here, try this. This is interesting.
Yeah.
It's never going to be the most expensive thing that's there. It might be something completely different.
Absolutely. And I guess if you're not doing that, where are you going to get your frame of reference for judging your own products, right?
Well, that's it. If you're the smartest person in the room, you're in the wrong room. And it's also, you read other books and follow other politicians to get a grasp of what the whole thing is. If you just, get the blinders on, you're just going to completely nullify yourself to the rest of the world. And that's a horrible position to be in.
Aye, absolutely. Absolutely. Well, it's good to hear that or what we say in the vPub is whiskey promiscuous, right? We're very curious. We like to go out there. We don't really care what the category, what the style, where the whiskey's from, what the brand is. We want to just see if it's good liquid first and foremost. I think that tends to be the thing. But you're working now we'll refer to them as Inverhouse tonight. Inverhouse has Speyburn, Balblair, Old Pulteney, AnCnoc, and Balmainac. Is that the right?
Balmainac, Croon Gin is also ours.
Yes, of course. Aye. So is that the first time you've worked? I feel like, did you work for someone before you were at Douglas Lang, or is this the first time at a producer?
No, I worked at Pernod Ricard. So I was in India for 2
Yes,
years as
of
the single
course.
malts ambassador for India, Sri Lanka, Nepal. But
Yeah.
I was handling single malts specifically. But of course, that leaks over into Monkey 47, Absolute, and other products as well.
So this is the first time that you've been in, let's say, your biggest distillery is still pretty small. Speyburn's your biggest, I think.
Okay, so Scottish distillery standards, yes,
Yes.
quite small. But I think what we're kind of getting at was in India I was very secluded. I didn't have access to the distilleries, didn't have access to the production sites, and that was great from an international experience point of view. That was brilliant. Loved my time there. And then 2 years or 18 months roughly with Douglas Lane. That's as you kind of alluded to, that's where I cut my teeth. Small group, and I will always love Douglas Lane for this. I think they're a fantastic company. I love the whiskies that they put out. I've only just stopped saying we to that instead of started saying they. I've stopped saying we, but that's where I started to learn the blending process, single casks, and seeing all 65 plus distilleries that they worked with, seeing the new mixed spirit go into first fill, second fill, third fill, bourbon casks, hogsheads, sherries, barriques, port pipes. It really broadened my understanding of not just brand name and liquid and glass, but production and how it transforms into the final product. And now with Inverhouse is a little jaunt around 5 distilleries and, access to behind the scenes and access to distillery managers and pestering them with questions is invaluable to how much I enjoy it.
Absolutely. And I think it's quite an interesting collective that you've got there over those 5 distilleries. I mean, I know that tonight isn't going to be, we're not going to spend our time, you're here as Stuart Baxter rather than Stuart Baxter of Inverhouse, right? But it's nice to give some context and some foundation and background as to where you are now. I've always been, you're the champion of the worm tubs. Only one of your distilleries doesn't have worm tubs, right? Is 4 out of 5 is quite a thing. And it depends whether you were to categorize Knock Do as a Highlander or a Speyside. What do you?
Heart of Speyside, I would argue. I mean, it's in it's just south of Huntly. It is in the centre of Speyside. So I would argue it is a Speysider, but I also would argue it's maybe not a classical Speyside profile.
Style.
I mean, again, we're moving so far away from that now. That's we're starting to leak in, and colour palettes are mixing with regards to traditional profiles from each region. But I would still argue it's more of a Highland style, but definitely a Speysider.
The days of making a very specific style and keeping it consistent in order to make a consistent product for blends is gone. We're experimenting now. We're mixing with peated and unpeated, and we're playing with all sorts of things at individual distilleries. Yeah, I appreciate you're saying. So that means you've got 3 Speysiders and 2 Highlanders, right? And in the portfolio.
2 Highlanders, 3 Speysiders. Yeah, correct.
Yeah. And how long have you been? When did you move? I mean, I was quite surprised. It was the Glasgow Whisky Festival, and I worked out that you were not at the right stand. I was like, what's going on there? And then I met you afterwards, and I said, "Oh, I see that you've moved." I never had a chance to get close to you at the festival itself, but I met you afterwards, and we had a chat about it. How long have you been in Inverhouse now?
It's only been 10 months now.
Wow.
It's only been 10 months. It's quite a short time actually as it goes. But it's funny, speak to colleagues now and it's, well, you've been here a couple of years, right? It really is kind of, you're so immersed in it. And obviously now we're coming into festival season. It was interesting because the big C word that I won't say, because, here shall not be named, but because the big C word, all the festivals of the end of last year were postponed and started shifting into January, February, March, April this year. So I've been non-stop since January, realistically, which has been great because it inducts you so well into how you talk about the brands, but also how we talk about the whiskies and taking people up to the distilleries and experiencing that side of things as well. So it's very beneficial, if not tiring.
Yes, I can imagine it's been tiring, and I do get the sense that when everything died in early 2020. And everyone was sent to work from home, right? Everybody was suddenly found themselves at home. There was no circuit. There was no anything to go to. Suddenly we had this explosion of online collaboration and learning and connecting online. Great. We've talked about it at length. But I have the sense now, Stuart, that now that things have kicked back off again, everyone seems to be even busier than they were before. I don't know if you would agree. If it just seems to be when I speak to people, they're almost dizzy with busyness.
I think it's the desire to get back out there. I mean, you can't you cannot replicate. I think the good thing about the online sessions was that it kept the community alive. You know, it kept that connection and people asking questions. But the one thing you can't replicate, and a great example of this was the whisky show in London last year, tail end of last year. The guy came up to our stand, was chatting away, and he said, you can't replicate this, you can't replicate this. He said, I've just picked up 2 bottles of this Danish whiskey. I can't remember the name of it. He said, I just picked up 2 bottles of this Danish whiskey, but I never would have paid the £45 to join an online tasting to try it. But because I've paid my entry fee and I can sample it, I've just bought 2 bottles from it.
Yeah,
It's really important.
I do agree. I think it's a different thing. I think there are advantages to both, and there's not complete overlap with both. Absolutely. There's nothing like being in that space. And let's be honest, as my trip has proved yet again, we all come for the whiskey, but we leave being happy about the people. That's the truth of it, right? Whiskey is just very good at bringing folk together, and there's nothing else like that than being in a maybe I'll make it to the Whiskey Show live this year. I've never been yet. Maybe I'll make it this year. Alistair Gray saying, does Stuart know when Knockdo is open again for tours? Need to pop over during a lunch break. Alistair Gray is literally on your door. Well, nobody's on Knockdo's doorstep, but you know what I mean. He's in Speyside. Yeah.
So we've never had a formal visitor centre, let's say, and it's something that we've always talked about, and that they've always talked about, and it's something that we're probably going to introduce a more formality to it. But if you just pop by, send an email or call the distillery, Gordon, Ali, one of them will be here to take your call and most likely show you around the distillery as well. There's something they're very, very proud of.
I'll share a wee anecdote to back that up. When I was making the 2017 How to Pronounce Scotch Whisky video, and I called AnCnoc Distillery, and I was speaking to a gentleman for a long time, and it was amazing. We got talking, and he was super enthusiastic. We'd talk about his whiskey, his products. I talked to him about the experience I'd had with the 1999 vintage, the bottle with the whiskey rev, and I spoke to him at length about the 16-year-old, which turned out to be his favourite too. And then as I'm hanging up, I said, "Oh, by the way, what's your name?" And he said, "Gordon Bruce. I'm the distillery manager." And I was absolutely blown away that I would have this really super high energy, enthusiastic discussion. He was quite happy. Expletives were fair game, by the way. He was quite happy. I felt like I was speaking to just, I guess I am. I'm speaking to a man who's been in a distillery most of his life. And I came away from that phone call even more endeared to a whiskey in a distillery I was already very much in love with. And it turned out to be Gordon Bruce. So by phone AnCnoc, and there's a good chance it's maybe going to be him that picks up the phone. Incredible.
Yeah. No, it's funny. And Gordon's, it's one of the most manual distilleries, not just in our portfolio, but in Scotland. And to testify, as one operator, we had a new guy start, he did a 12-hour shift and 22,000 steps in that single shift.
My target is set at a puny little 8,000, and I'll be honest with you, if I have a busy day in front of the screen, I don't get close to that as well. 22,000, that's a shift. That's a shift.
I know. I think I'm 20 steps to the fridge.
That's right. So it depends.
Front door's only 10 if I order a pizza.
That's right. We're all guilty, we're trying to find ways to catch up, but really it's habit we need to change. I've actually started to use the upstairs bathroom so that there's at least a flight of stairs involved in a day, right? Helen is saying you're spot on with that comment regarding going back to Isla Aquavita. Thanks very much, Helen. You're absolutely right. It's about that connection. Gordon Fraser is saying that was the biggest takeaway from our time at Campbelltown on Friday. Obviously talking about the connection, the people again. And Gordon Fraser is saying, the people, ! Absolutely. Petehead Frank is saying, met Gordon Bruce last year. What a nice man. Billy Abbott is in, and good to see Billy. And he's saying Gordon is great. His ability to swear is incredible. He is a poet. Listen, it's all about context, right? It's all about context. Terrific stuff. I look forward to going up to see it. I've never actually stepped over the threshold at AnCnoc, so I need to make an effort to do that. Or at Knockdo, rather. I need to make the effort to do that. Listen, let's get the wheels on this concept. Let's get the wheels. I've given you 5 categories, Stuart, and I've asked you to pick whiskies, and it had to be whiskies that you would have picked anyway, but try to fit them into this category for a given scenario. So I've asked you to come up with something that's always on hand, a staple. I've asked you to come up with a crowd pleaser, something a bit decadent, a VIP dram, and then a big, bold flavour bomb, which I think hopefully gives us 5 interesting categories that the two of us can get our geek on for a wee while and talk about why we've picked these whiskies. I'm not able to match your whiskies, obviously. I do have 1 or 2, but I don't need to, because I'm more interested in your take on it. And then if I've got something similar, we can have a to and fro about it. But the first one, and I've done wee straps so that I can keep everybody in the chat live and people watching on the replay up to speed. The first one is this concept of a permashelf whiskey, right? And the permashelf is just a silly name I came up with to talk about whether we are aware of it or not. There are whiskies that we replace without even thinking, because it's good value, because they're delicious, because they're always available. We love to have them and we love to share them, so they're always an automatic replacement. That's kind of what we're going for here. Let me ask at the outset, Stuart, how many of the 5 that you've picked are your own portfolio? How many are your... 2 out of 5. 2 out of 5. That's not bad. That's not bad. You could have kicked the backside out it, right? But that's fair enough. And that, I think that betrays you as somebody who is a whiskey geek and somebody who's whiskey promiscuous.
Wait to see the other 3. That's what
that's right. So the other 3 are going to be Pernod Ricard and Dougie Lang, right?
100%. 100%.
Terrific stuff. All right. So you understand the concept of what I'm after. You know, everybody's got, whether they're aware of it or not, they've got their staples, right? And it's usually an emotional thing, but it has to be something that's tasty and available and reasonably well priced. Would you agree?
Yeah. Has to be. That's the whole point, right? You know, it's something that's, you pick it up without thinking. You know, it's, you pass it in the supermarket or wherever you may be, if you're picking up other drams, and it's, oh, hi, I'm nearly done with that. And you throw it into the basket without even thinking about it. It has to be that affordability and drinkability side of it.
You're on the online flash sales, you're in the supermarket aisle and it's on an offer, and you buy a backup bottle automatically because you know it's a good sipper and a good drinker.
Yeah.
I'll quickly say that I had a think about this earlier in the dram. I'm not drinking it now, but the dram I had before we went live tonight was my choice of that one. It would be probably something like a Glencadam 10. It's not an easy one to get at a supermarket, certainly, but it's a fantastic whiskey to always have on hand. And I had a wee twitch when I realised this is all I've got left in it. So this, you know, 35-ish pounds, this is an automatic replace, fully natural whiskey too. Terrific stuff happening from Angus Dundee at Glencadam. But what would, sorry, Steve Eccles has bought me a dram, Stuart. He said, hi both, from Steve and Sheena, Yorkshire. Did Stuart get the package we sent him? We loved the tasting in York last week with Stuart.
Steve, yes, I got it this afternoon. Thank you very much. I had to disappear for drinks with a friend, but I did get it. I really appreciate it. Steve and Sheena joined me in York and we did the Baldoyle Roadshow, if anyone had followed it,
yes.
And kindly sent me some podcasts, some whiskey podcasts. Knowing that I'm going to be doing a significant amount of driving in the coming few weeks. So
fantastic. I've also got another podcast that I can... So is Steve involved in a whiskey podcast then?
I don't think, Steve, please let me know if you are. I don't believe you are, but it's something that you follow quite readily. But the 3 that you've sent me, I'm looking forward to shoving them on because, the music is on rotation just now. If anyone's got any music suggestions as well, please let me know. I'm sick and tired of the same playlist running on it every hour.
When you're doing all that driving, it can be good to have the music to carry you along. Steve, let me know if you're involved in a podcast and let me know what it is. And thanks for your dram, buddy. Cheers. All right, let's go with the big reveal. What have you picked? What would be one of your staples and why?
I'm not looking great for the first 3, I've got to say. Last 2 we're going to finish strong. So,
okay. Oh, you're talking about, rather than being weak whiskies, you're talking about, I guess, on brand then?
On brand, yeah, right. Okay, let's not.
That's okay. Yeah, you don't worry about that.
The reason this is the first one I've picked is when I got offered the role at Inverhouse is that my dad has been a big fan of the flagship, which is Old Pulteney, for a very, very long time. And this is genuinely, the 12-year-old is something that hasn't ever left my shelf or my dad's shelf. Didn't pick the 12 though. And the reason I didn't pick the 12 is I picked the Huddart. And the reason that I've picked Huddart is the cask makeup I find really interesting, very geeky. And I think it throws a lot of people, because I think a lot of people look at Pulteney and are you know, there's not a lot been done in a long time with Pulteney. You know, we took the 17 and 21-year-old. Please, if anyone wants to send me hate mail, feel free. I've got it's piling up at the front door.
Bring it on, bring it on.
Yeah, I mean, the cask maturation with this is genuinely interesting and quite geeky, and it takes a lot of people back. Like, oh, I didn't realise that was, and it's something we don't shout about. So it's Old Pulteney Huddart, which is our non-age statement, named after a guy called Captain Joseph Huddart. We're on Huddart Street, but this is 100% ex-bourbon, 46% non-chill, no caramel. But this is finished in AnCnoc peated casks. Now, peated casks isn't nothing new. Scapaglanza did an absolute stunning one. But this is AnCnoc peated, meaning the peat was mainland peat as opposed to Islay peat. So closer to that campfire smoke as opposed to that iodine TCP note.
Yeah.
The one thing I love about peat, I mean, when I was in Stockholm and did the Stockholm duty-free tour, it was brilliant on the boat. But what I love about it, I tried Swedish peat for the first time. And it's very slightly different to mainland or Highland peat or Aberdeenshire peat in this case. What I love about it is that phenols, I always kind of, and this is very anecdotal, this is no way technical at all, but phenols themselves, I always find that they're carriers and they have their own flavour profile and almost kind of texture. But what they carry is always quite different. You know, this is me speaking in my, welcome to my brain. But in Islay, it's carrying those iodine TCP notes, but has this kind of shape and form of its own. And then when you come to Highland Aberdeenshire peat, you've still got a phenolic DNA. You know, you can still say that this is peaty, but it's a very different style. And I think people are quite taken aback. And normally I actually don't tell people that this is peated cask because the blinders just go on. Yes. No, I don't like peat. I'm not interested. So I always tell people, just stay, you know, I'm not going to tell you this is all ex-bourbon. And the predominant flavors are, for me, vanillas and coconuts and red apples and those stereotypical notes that we associate. And the peat, for me, is that sprinkling of salt on food. You know, it's nowhere near the main dish. Yep. It's an addition to it. So that's it. It would have been Pulteney 12, but I chose Huddart because it's just a bit more interesting to talk about.
Well, I think it is interesting to talk about this, and I'll make a confession. I've opened this tonight just to let it breathe a wee bit. This was literally delivered today, and it was only because when you submitted your list through to me, I spotted that this was one of your picks, and I thought, you know, that I've not tried that, and it's not an expensive one. And there was a huge misconception with the rebranding and the relaunch with this one, that this was the new entry. The Huddart being the non-age statement was the new entry level pot. What it's not. The 12 remains the entry level whiskey. This is actually 46% ABV. It's nice for you to confirm that it's all natural as well. It's amazing to see. This is quite a rich color. So I'm imagining a lot of, you've mentioned the first fill bourbon, right? So there's a great color on this whiskey. But I bought this just to try it. And when I opened it tonight and I was getting ready, there was no other whiskies around or open. This is just sitting breathing, and I got a whiff of peat smoke. And I don't know, I can literally put my face in a Lagavulin and not pick up peat at times. That's how ridiculously I can suffer from peat blight. But tonight, I picked up, it's only coming out of this open bottle. So I did get a wee bit of peat smoke. And I think it was one of the first things I asked you. I said, is Huddart peated? And then you obviously mentioned that. But one of the interesting things, and I hope it works tonight, I've already uncorked this, is that when I opened my old Pulteney 15, there was quite a noise from it. Have you ever, the neck pour from an old Pulteney bottle, it's quite something. Wait till you hear this. Oops, it didn't. Oh, it glugged a bit there. Did you hear it when it went back up?
It's like the glug glug jugs. I've got one through in the kitchen actually.
Yeah,
the fish glug glug jugs.
Yeah, usually. Typical, it didn't perform when I needed it to, but it makes quite.
You got it. I heard it.
Get it.
Yeah, you got it.
So I recognise that on the new old Pulteney bottles. It does make quite a noise. So it's nice to see that we have a much more natural product here. I don't know what I paid for this. I think about 39 quid. Would that be about right? I think I paid 39, 40 quid.
Yeah, around that mark. Yeah, around that mark. Yeah.
Yeah. Not a lot of peat on the nose now. And I'm not getting a lot, but I've just come off the back of this other one that I've been drinking, and I'll talk about that later because I think it marries up to another one of yours. So I've just come off a more peaty dram. So there's not a lot of peat on this now. It's funny how you come into Old Pulteney, you're looking for some of the those kind of coastal maritime things. So inevitably you find them. So tell me about the maturation on this again. Did you say first fill bourbon?
No, predominantly second fill bourbon.
Second fill.
And then re-racked into refill peated casks, all barrels that have come from peated AnCnoc, the peated run of AnCnoc.
Is this natural colour?
Natural colour.
It's quite a colour to get from refill casks. Fantastic.
And it's
Tommy
funny,
Elmer is saying that sounds like the snorkel flooding when you dive.
That's exactly what we aim for.
Ian Bruce is saying, Aquavite, staying right next to the peat moss. We are not really Highland or Speyside, more Aberdeenshire. Maybe a new classification required. Oh, wow. Ian Bruce? Would you know who Ian Bruce is? No?
I don't know.
No relation to Gordon, perhaps? Or maybe he's in here as an alias. And I've noticed that with the AnCnoc peated expressions, that the peat is slightly different. If you ever get your head around Highland Park peat, you know that it's a completely different proposition from West Coast Highland peat, from Isla peat, from all of these things. It's fascinating to contrast them and taste them together and realize that when people talk about that iodine and medicinal and all of these, rope and tar and all of these things that they're talking specifically about Isla peat, it's fascinating how that can come to be. And then when you're on the mainland peat, you're kind of more aromatic. You're thinking of more of kind of organic vegetal type wood smoke and these kind of softer, maybe less harsh elements. It's super fascinating to contrast them.
It is, and you know what?
Are you getting peat on this one?
Myself, I don't get it on the nose at all. It's not till you have that burst open moment. And I was explaining this to someone in a tasting in the Balby Roadshow was, we add water to whiskey and we talk about it opening up, is what we're doing in the glass is adding water to whiskey. It pops it open because it creates that volatility. But as soon as we take it onto the palate, your saliva reacts with the whiskey. So what you're recreating in the glass of your nose is what's happening on your palate. So for me, the nose, I agree with you. I think it's very subtle. It's actually almost quite soft and flat. And that's why I added some water there when it pops open the nose. As soon as you take it onto the palate, it's that growth and expansion of flavor and that vanilla. But it's got a spicier note to it. And I don't know whether that's the finishing and peat that's brought it into the fray, but it's got a slight spicier. And I mean like black peppercorn spiciness.
I've put a wee bit of water in it. It's interesting that I was getting a whiff of smoke from just an open bottle, but as soon as it's in the glass, but I'm sure that's because I've been drinking a peaty dram now.
I thought you'd be desensitized to peat.
After a week on Isla, right?
I know. So.
I think when we were on Isla, all of us agreed that we stopped tasting peat very early on in the week. All of us were tasting fruit and other things beyond the peat. And we were having to remind ourselves to try and check how peaty the whiskey was. It's just the thing that happens to you when you do that. But when I came back and took a few days of a break, as soon as it only takes a few days and you recalibrate quite quickly, I think. But the wee bit of water I've put in this is brought it open a wee bit. The spice element, for me, it's a pepper note.
That's what I say, and the palate really brings that out. I think it really shows there.
So you've got an emotional connection to this whiskey, and you've specifically picked the Huddart tonight because you felt it was interesting. So what we're saying is that the Stuart Baxter staple, the whiskey that he's always got on the shelf, is Old Pulteney, but that was the case before you joined the company.
That was the case before they joined the company, but the two, I'm trying to think, maybe three that have always been is Glengoyne. I think I've talked about this before. I talked about this so frivolly after 5 drams that Gordon Dundas came on and said, "Are you looking for a job?" But I grew up next to Glengoyne, so that's another one that's always, and actually sadly not on the shelf just now. But Glengoyne's one that I'll always pick up and have on the shelf.
An emotional thing again. So this is emotional because you're old man, right?
That's emotional because of the old man, but it was like my gran and grandpa drank Glengoyne, my dad drank Glengoyne, but it was my dad that fell in love with Pulteney. It wasn't my grandparents; they weren't Pulteney drinkers. Quite
a different whiskey too from Glengoyne. Quite interesting. Scotty is in. Good to see you, Scotty. I hope you're doing well. It's Scotty S. He's saying, is that natural Isla colour or the equivalent of E150? Looks like Isla had good weather. No, actually, it turns out that it's Old Pulteney Huddart. And it's refill bourbon, and the finishing casks are refill AnCnoc peated. What's the peated AnCnoc called now? It's Peat Heart or something you've called it, or?
Yes, Peat Heart is. I think we're on number 3 now, but Peat Heart's the run that we run of AnCnoc. So AnCnoc is the only one that we run a peated a peated run of new malt spirit across the portfolio of distilleries. We don't do it across any of the others.
But you didn't always do that at AnCnoc, right? That was something that you started in much more recent years. Is that correct?
As it goes, but you know, it's funny. Like all Speysiders and all distilleries would have done a peated run. Is how far we're talking. But yes, yeah, in modern day distilling, yes, it's always been unpeated runs.
And is that to give you more variety within your own portfolio, given that you don't have an Islay distillery or a West Highland, or is it just...
Yeah, and to my understanding, it was a discussion between Gordon Bruce and Stuart Harvey, who's Stuart Harvey's our master blender. And Gordon, if anyone that knows him, and there's a few people clearly do, Gordon is the Willy Wonka of the mad scientist of distilling. I really truly think he is. We'll talk about the worm tubs later on. There's an interesting conversation there. But I think it was a discussion between him and Stuart Harvey that I can do this and we can do it well. It's like, right, cool. It makes sense, you know, and it's a collaboration. Your brand were like, this makes sense. Cool. There's a space in the market for it. And Gordon's like, let's get it done.
Aye. So how long is the peated? I think I remember when they were launched. So I'm thinking about 2015, 2016, when the Rascan and Rutter or Cutter, or I can't remember what they were all called.
So many of them hidden away.
So many names and things. There was duty-free ones, and there was a kind of a general retail. There was a lot of kind of peated expressions come out from AnCnoc. But now you've settled on a single expression. Is that what's happened there? Or?
Yeah, it made sense because, I mean, I think you know yourself, it was just overwhelming having all these different peated styles, and it's like, what realistically is the consumer's asking, what realistically is the difference between Raskin and all that? So it was purely just to simplify it, and it makes much more sense from cask storage point of view, blending point of view, and you know, lowering the load of 3 blenders that we've got at hand in the lab.
And what you found is an interesting way to bring a peaty lick to an old Pulteney without actually blending in making it a blended malt. So you've just used the casks, and obviously just that the lightest of seasoning from the cask and the Huddart. So I hadn't appreciated that, or if I did, I'd long forgotten it. This is the first time the Huddart has been in my shelf here. And I have to say, it's a neck pour. I'm not going to judge it, but it's coming across quite pleasant. I can see why this would be a staple pour.
Yeah, and the funny thing is that it's not new, right? Peated cask finish is not new. It's nothing new. But I think what's interesting about it is it's Aberdeenshire peated cask, as opposed to Islay peated cask. And again, it's not knocking either one, and I'll never knock any other whiskies. One is not better than the other. It's just different. But it's just interesting to see, you know, a coastal whiskey going into an Aberdeenshire peated cask finish.
Aye, exactly. Aye. But I mean, you could do it and just not mention it, right?
And it's not something that we do mention on like comms and all this nonsense, but it's something I talk about in tastings because it's interesting.
Glenn Duncan is in. Glenn, I know you're making plans to come over to Scotland. He's just saying good morning because he's still down in Australia. He's saying sounding a wee bit raspy there, Roy. If I'm sounding raspy, apologies. I don't feel raspy. I'm otherwise healthy. Mikey Hayes, and good to see you, buddy. Saying evening, Roy, evening all. Bit late for the vPub tonight, Mikey. You're never late for a vPub. Scott is saying you missed the joke. I meant the tan. And Mark Goins, good to see you, Mark. He's saying I think he was talking about your tan. You know, it's not a tan. I think it's windburn. It's just from being on island. It's just on being outdoors and things.
I was feeling quite ill.
It's really funny. We went out on the boat on the Sunday, the first full day on Isla. We didn't visit a distillery, just went out on a boat. Because there was a lot of Isle of Virgins that were with us there, and they were just like kids at Christmas. And I think it was nice to just take them out and look at the island from a little bit of a distance and go along the Kildalton coast and see, you know, Lefroy, Lagavulin, and Ardbeg with the big warehouses and the black painted script and things, and then just look at the wildlife and just take in the island and just get connected with the land before we go and get our whiskey geek on. And I think it was the right thing to do. It was great fun. But it was cloudy as hell, and I didn't know if it was going to get windy, if it was going to be choppy, if it was going to rain. Didn't know what was going to happen. And there was a point that we were filming Lagavulin, and the sun opened up. There's this pocket, and the clouds opened up, and the beams of light shone down and lit up the Lagavulin warehouses. It was we were watching this happening, and we all let out a wall like this. It was incredible. And then as the day went on, it started to get brighter and brighter, and we were all there in our big jackets and our layers because we were getting blasted by this cold wind on this. But of course, the sun is splitting the sky at times, and there's no protection at all. So we all came off the boat like tomatoes. It was incredible. But so it's maybe that, and also the fact that it's late at night and I'm generally quite pink anyway, Scotty. Sorry I missed the joke. And Mark Goins, nice to have you in, and thanks for pointing out that he was talking about my complexion and not the whiskey's complexion. James DeGulio, he was actually hanging out with us on Isla. We went into the Sea Salt restaurant on Isla, and James was sitting there with his partner Gail and with Jerry. I believe the gentleman he was with was Jerry, and we got to hang out with James for a wee bit as well. James, it's nice to welcome you in. I can see that you're at the dentist, so that's no problem. And Andrew is saying Star Wars released an unpeated release called the Unexpeated. Oh, unexpeated. They sourced a wet Isla cask, Lafroig, I believe. It was still quite peat intense. Well, I was surprised tonight at the first approach of that Huddart. I could detect a wee bit of smoke, but it's gone now, and I think it's just because of what I've been sipping alongside. Aye, but a decent start. So that, Stuart, is your staple. Tom Elmer is saying, I'm going to ask you something about Old Pulteney in a second. Tom Elmer is saying, will AnCnoc do another art label again like they did with the Peter Arkles?
There's no reason to say no. It's something I don't know the answer to that because it's not something that's been discussed, but there's no reason to say no. Yeah, definitely a possibility, but
possibly.
Generally don't know.
And Andrew's saying your tan is hiding your usual whiskey hue. The question I've got to ask you is while we're on this Old Pulteney, if I don't ask you, somebody's going to come in from the chat and ask you, and that is, you did mention, and I know the answer to this, I don't mean to put you in the spot, we lost the 17-year-old Old Pulteney, we lost the 21-year-old Old Pulteney, I know. and especially somebody who's in the job after the event, right? Probably somebody who was just as sad as anyone to see the back of 17 and 21. And most of the people who work for Inverhouse were sad to see the back of 17 and 21. But things can't last forever. Stocks deplete, profiles change. There's a need to reposition, and it's malt whiskey. It's a batch-made product. We're constantly fighting this concept of consistency and always keeping something in the market. And that's why we see the wax and wane of these things. Has the new branding for Old Pulteney been successful generally?
Generally, yes. It's brought more and new consumers to the brand. And I hate speaking like this, but it's true, right? But the 17, I was really sad, especially the 17. I much preferred it over the 21 out of the two. Mm-hmm. I was really gutted to see it, well, when it went. But, I mean, we still get hidden bottles getting about. But Malcolm Waring, our head distiller, our master distiller, he's still got, I think, case and a half sitting up at Pulteney. Personal stock. But it was just that way. It was, speaking honestly, like, it's just transparency. It was a brand-led decision to, reset the core range, have a 12, 15, and as you say, like, make sure the stocks were aging appropriately and that we had space for 15, 18 and moving upwards. And it was just a decision that made it more concise. It made it cleaner from a brand perspective. It wasn't driven by flavor in that sense, if that makes sense. You know what I mean? But it has brought more and new, especially new and younger consumers to the brand, which is a success in an overall perspective.
Yes. And I think that, there's always a bit of a nostalgia and things. There's another one I'm going to speak to you about tonight, at least another one that's a nostalgia one for me. But it's one of these things that I think sometimes marketers, if they're not impassioned, if they're not whiskey geeks, if they don't enjoy or get whiskey, or maybe agencies that they're very good at their job and very good at their task, and they're absolute creative professionals, they're amazing, but they maybe don't get whiskey. They forget how emotional whiskey can be.
Yeah.
It affects us in a very visceral way.
It really does.
And when it's taken away from us, you have to wear a suit of armor at times, I imagine, in order to field that kind of people that are genuinely sad that they can't get their staples, their permashelf bottles anymore, right?
You really do, but I completely agree with you. And the horrible thing is, and we talk about entry-level malts being at 40%, chill filtered and all that jazz. And it's funny, I'm always speaking to whiskey geeks and whiskey lovers all the time, but it's in the grand scheme of the world, it's really funny that we only really make up 0.1%. And it's horrible because we're the most impassioned about them. But it's not where people tailor the branding to, and that is the horrible reality. And that's why I think the rise of single casks, independent bottlers, is such an amazing thing, that giving you that opposite side of it. You know, that's the honest answer, is that, you know, it's the consistency with brand is so important, because it allows you to have that brand on your shelf all the time as a consistent offering of liquid. But when we get to independent bottlers, that's where you see variance, volatility, and just wild stuff. Someone mentioned Starward, they were talking about earlier. Starward are doing amazing things. And that's where we get solace in creative and interesting liquid as whiskey geeks and whiskey lovers.
I think that if you look at some of the most celebrated brands, they tend to be founded, run, and growing through whiskey geeks, impassioned whiskey individuals. And I appreciate what you're saying, that we're a tiny sliver of the whiskey drinking community. But we are informed. We're genuinely 100%. Informed, and we know very well, you know, in a very promiscuous, broad way, all the whiskies that's available to us, we're trying. So, and I appreciate that what you're saying is, we're a small part of the market. But I think our voice can be valuable at times.
Oh, no, I completely agree. And I put myself in that category as well.
Yeah, I
completely put myself in that category. But the interesting thing is that you're still seeing you're still seeing like limited editions and weird finishes now coming from brands, because that demand driven by that section of the market is
that's what we forget. I think that people, as they go down their whiskey journey, they start looking for more pure forms of whiskey. They're looking for more distillate forward, perhaps, or something that's much cleaner and simpler and even more subtle, maybe arguably. But they forget where they've come from, and the drive to offer people hooks and clear contrasts of flavor, so that people coming into the categories don't feel such a noob. Right, they can clearly differentiate these these contrasts in flavor, even when they're not that experienced. And my brother was with me on Islay, and he's very much like that. He loves whiskey, he really does, but he doesn't study it like I do. But when he was together with us on Islay and Campbelltown, he was picking up, I'm sure, things that he would previously have not really considered a contrast, and he was able to pick up these, and it's down to the finishing cask or the maturation cask or something. And that's really compelling for somebody coming into the category to taste these different flavors. And then the golden moment of being able to attribute it to a point in its production. Maturation, peated barley as opposed to unpeated barley, a different cut point, and a longer fermentation time, whatever it is, to then make that leap to realize that that's happening. That's really encouraging for somebody new and coming into whiskey.
And that's where the value lies with that, is that we are the biggest advocates for Scotch whiskey on the whole, because I have tried tirelessly. I've got a couple of mates in the chat just now, but I have tried tirelessly, not with these guys, to drip my friends into whiskey. I have tried them on, I swear, Roy, I've tried everything. I've tried really old single grain, you know, stuff that's not necessarily readily accessible and affordable, but it's nice and sweet and palatable, and, you know, nice sweet tobaccos and caramel. I've tried single cask stuff. I've tried heavily sherried virgin oaks, first fill bourbons. I can't for the life of me find anything. And I'm of that expression, you know, there's a whiskey out there for everyone, and I've really tried with them, but they're the worst pals in the world to drink whiskey with, because they're just not into it. But I'll never stop trying.
You need to send them round to an evangelist, Stuart. Send them round here.
I'll never stop
spend the nights in here with me.
I'll never stop dragging them
beat them over the head until they get something that they love.
I'll always drag them into the pot still in the bon accord and shove them in, like, right, okay, one. And I'm like, right, okay, just one. We'll try this, have a half pint, we'll have that. I'll never stop doing that, and I'll never stop trying.
Yeah. It does take it. And I mean, you need some curiosity. If they're willing to drink it, they're probably pulling your leg. They probably love whiskey. They just want you to buy all the drams.
I'll buy you one. I'll buy you one.
Pretending that they don't like it. Fantastic. Whiskey with Molly is saying, I was at a festival recently and was disappointed to find the people behind most of the tables were not distillery people, but rather people hired in. Very poor experience, missing passion. I think, Ben, generally we're seeing a lot of issues with travel and staffing and things, infrastructure and things are, it was hugely affected our experience traveling the last couple of weeks. Yeah. There are different weird things happening right now. Have you got any comments on that, Stuart? Do you ever have to hire folk in?
You actually touched on it earlier on when we've had this influx of, and it's been really good, like local festivals, bigger festivals, but they've come back in force, especially this year. And when you're much larger companies like Edrington and Pernod Ricard and Diageo, they have the force of people who are educated and knowledgeable and ambassadors, and they're cross-brand trained and they can come in and do really, really amazing jobs. But when you've got a smaller company, and I include us within that in terms of our resource for humans, which is terrible to say, but but people that there's not a lot of us that can stand behind a stand and have the deep knowledge. We have a team called Build My Brands who are very passionate about the brands and everything. But when we have someone that asks about, how long is your fermentation time, what yeasts, what barley species you're using just now, they're not going to have that level of knowledge. So it's once you spread yourself too thin, there's opportunities that normally we just turn down personally, because if we've not got the capacity to be there ourselves in some form, we just won't do it, because the cost versus risk of something like that happening is very much there. But
and you can't clone yourself. And you and I spoke earlier this week. We were both feeling really fatigued after the travels, right, that we'd had. And goodness knows, mine was mostly leisure and pleasure, where you were actively working. So I appreciate and it's not always kind of 9 to 5 for you either. So I do get it. Ian Bruce is saying, oh, sorry, Tim is in. Tim Hoekstra is saying, Stuart should try to hand them some alternatives. That's your whiskey pals, your pals. Aye. You get them in the sweet route, bring them in with some rums or something. You never know. Ian Bruce is saying, does Stuart believe we have another room in the spirits market to promote whiskey with drinks like vodka getting affected by global distribution issues? Well, that's quite a weighty question. Does Stuart believe that we have another room in the spirits market to promote whiskey with drinks like vodka getting affected by global distribution issues? I'm not sure. Do you understand that question? Sorry, Ian.
There's two ways I can maybe interpret it, but I don't want to start answering them and I'm wrong.
All right, Ian, if you want to clarify it a wee bit, I'm maybe just reading it wrong. Anthony's saying, I count myself as a whiskey geek and love discovering new, naturally presented drams, but I'm not a whiskey snob and can still enjoy a glass of something way more mainstream. I think that's true of so many of us, honestly, Anthony. Especially when you're in company, you're at someone's house and they say, would you like a whiskey? And of course you say, aye. And then they bring you something that you would perhaps never normally buy or drink at home. And then 2 drams in, you're realizing it's lovely. What's the problem? It's right. It's just being a wee bit more open-minded. Helen is saying, I've converted your youngest, but still trying to convert the eldest. Aye, that's what she's trying to do at home. There has to be a window of curiosity. They have to want to try it a wee bit. Blackfen is saying, whiskey geeks may not make up a high percentage of the market, but don't forget, for every whiskey geek, there is at least 10 friends and family who rely on their opinion for buying advice. That's true. And also coupled with what we've just been talking about, there's nothing like a whiskey geek to bring all their friends into the fold as well.
Exactly.
Everyone is saying, I was wondering if you might ask Stuart why whiskey's aged 15 and older prices seem to have really skyrocketed in the last 3 years. That seems to have gone up greater than inflation. Well, it's proven. We noticed it at the start of the year. Ingvar Rond was on for a look ahead. And that was one of the things that he pointed out. 12-year-old and under is pretty stable price-wise.
Yeah.
Above 12, the prices are going crazy, and it seems to be getting worse year by year. Do you think people are charging what the market demands, Stuart, or do you think there's genuine reasons for this?
I think it's looking at market demand, but it's also kind of price matching a lot of the time as well. It's not like everyone gets in a room and discusses that we're going to start raising prices, but there's other. Honestly, I don't know is the real answer, but it's a lot to do with price matching and seeing what competitors are paying on the market as well. And it's not. Undercutting isn't always the best thing to do from a brand position because it looks like it's selling cheaply. But in all honesty, in my personal opinion, I agree. I think whiskey's getting way too expensive, especially above the 15-year-old mark. We were talking about it earlier on. I remember picking up a Bunnahabhain 18 for I think it was 85, 88 quid, and that was a long time ago. And I wasn't making buckets of money. I'm still not making buckets of money, but that was pushing the boat out. And now you're seeing 18-year-olds for going at quite high a mark. So speaking personally, I think it's over the mark. But the interesting thing is like looking at the price of, someone mentioned fuel prices. That's one thing. Price of malt was, I think 4 months ago, just doubled. Went from £350 to over £700 for a ton of malt. That's the first time in history that it's gone over £500, £600 and £700 for a ton of malt.
And I think I'm working out what Ian's question was about. He's talking about the lack of availability of vodka, obviously, with the current situation.
Yeah.
We're also seeing the same strain on grain, and that's all impacting things as well. And it's only a matter of time before that ripples down the supply chain, and we see that directly in the prices. And Whiskey Geek Ben is in as well. Good to see you, Ben. I hope you're well. And he's saying vodka harder to buy because of distribution issues, people looking for alternatives, an avenue to introduce them to whiskey. Absolutely. Please don't let it be something that drives the prices up anymore. Great question from Cameron Corlett. Stuart's favourite new distillery. Before we go on to your next one, we're just so much to talk about. We're not getting through the categories. So there you go. What's your favourite new distillery, Stuart? From that's from Cameron Corlett.
Favourite new distillery? They've been around for a while, but see the Thompson brothers.
Dornoch.
The stuff they produce. It's brilliant. Absolutely amazing juice.
Can you buy it?
I've seen some of their experimental stuff. When you go up to Dornoch and actually stay with them, and if they're kicking about, you can try some of their stuff if they're kicking about.
That's the way to do it. That's the way to do it.
It's not necessarily liquid quality, but see Simon and Phil, see when they're talking, I have an okay whiskey knowledge. You know, guys like Billy Abbott and everything. It's crazy. Yeah. You know, if you surround yourself with people who know more, you're always going to learn. And you speak to guys like Billy and Ian Logan, who was my mentor at Pernod. Like, he's just through the roof, like Gordon Bruce. But see when you speak to Simon and Phil, you almost have to turn and it's like, explain this to me as if I'm 5 years old, please, because their whiskey knowledge is fascinating, and their age, they're young guys, and they're so driven, and the blending and their cask selection process is fascinating. So it's not necessarily like the liquid they have, but I'm just so impressed with them every time I get a chance to either speak to them or see what they put out.
We might be speaking about the Thompson brothers again in a wee minute. But there's so many questions coming in as well. Canpai saying there's also the trickle down effect. Mac, good to see you. If I talk about an obscure bottling of a brand, less nerdy, peeps will go and hunt for the available expressions. The trickle down effect. So it doesn't need to be the specific expression. It can just open people's mind to another brand of whiskey that they've never tried before. Absolutely. Whiskey Diary. That's Ben. He's bought me a wee dram and he said, have a dram on me. Thank you very much, Ben. Thanks for the dram, buddy. I hope you're keeping well too. He's Glaswegian, by the way. You wouldn't think so from his accent, but he's a Glaswegian these days. Nice to have you in, Ben. Great stuff on YouTube as well, buddy. Jaime, not Jamie, is saying, are there plans to fill the gap between AnCnoc 12 and 18? Jaime, that's one of my questions. When we get to AnCnoc, I'm definitely going to be hitting them straight between the eyes with that very question. But it's a good one. It's a very good one. And Ian Bruce is saying the Dornoch guys are so open and brilliant, and how they work the ballot is inspirational. Absolutely. They're trying to get whiskey into people that are just going to open and indulge the flavors that they're producing rather than keep it sealed. And despite all their best efforts, people don't get to drink it and feed back what they've created. You know, it's just so sad.
They do a really good split between on-trade and off-trade, which I really appreciate. You know, they don't sell everything into the off-trade, so it's just bottle buying. They will make sure that bottles go into specific on-trade units, so people.
We're seeing more of that, even from retailers now as well.
It's so important because
Royal Mile,
it's a £60 bottle. I'm like, it's a risk because I don't want to buy it and I'm not going to enjoy it. But then there's going to be a bar, and the specific bars they'll sell to. You go to it, you try it, and you'll love it. Right, I'm going to get a bottle.
Aye. If you can get it.
If you can get it.
Possible future vPub guests, Phil and Simon Thompson. That's from North Coast drummer Tony. I've only met Simon. Who's the one with the reddish hair? That's Phil or Simon? The taller one.
It's terrible, isn't it, Phil?
Right. So whoever was at Limburg. Oh my goodness, I'm embarrassed now. Is the one I met? I think it was Simon. Apologies, Phil or Simon or both of you. But I have never approached them with it, but I could see that they would be very popular guests, and at least we would get to know which is which. Highland Hamish is saying Thompson Brothers usually well stocked at Woodwinters and plenty behind the bar at the Malt Room in Inverness. Nice one, Hamish. And I'm sure that there's plenty behind the bar at Dornoch Castle as well.
Yes, yeah.
Let's go on. We've been chatting far too much. My goodness. Number two, the second category is the crowd pleaser. What would you be picking out as a crowd pleaser? Now, we already know that you're going to be staying on brand, here for this dram. So what's it going to be? This has to be something. Maybe your pals that you're trying to get in, but you've got a mixed room of people. You're pouring something that everybody's going to appreciate, something that's not going to be too out there on the flavors, not too out there on the ABV. What would be your crowd pleaser pick, Stuart?
Old brand, not new, not current necessarily. And the reason I picked it is because I wanted to kill it tonight as well. So another selfish reason. It was the Timorous Beastie 18, the winter edition.
Perfect.
This was a limited release. They do it every year, but it's a limited release of one of 450. It's 100% sherry matured, but it's blended malt, and it's only 44.9. But that's cask strength.
Yes.
Blending batting strength, let's say, and natural colour, which I think is.
Well, you'll remember, I'm going to pour. I don't have a Dougie Lang. I'm a big advocate of Dougie Lang. When you were last on, we mostly spent our time talking about blended malts when you were last on 2 years ago. And that was a great vPub. If anybody wants to go back, I'll link it underneath. But you were obviously representing the remarkable regional malts back then. Timorous Beastie is, of course, one of them. There's lots of special editions that comes out. I have a problem with all of those whiskies. They are incredibly easy to drink. It almost feels like they're evaporating.
It's scary.
It's the drinkability of all of them, and I could be talking about the standard Timorous Beastie, the standard Scallywags. I can be talking about the age-stated ones, the limited editions. They're all ridiculously easy to drink. And if the prices stay where they usually are, that 18-year-old, not the winter edition that you have, but the 18-year-old Timorous Beastie, I bought for our session together at £54. That was on special offer. That's not what you would expect to pay for it normally.
And it's malt whiskey, and it's 18 years old.
Yeah, it's all the youngest component in there is malt whiskey, 18 years old. That is when anxiety is removed from the enjoyment. I think that's when that's why it goes down so quickly, because you know that the value is good, so you can just relax and enjoy it, and it delivers so well. I'm going to top up my glass that I poured earlier because I have a similar product here. And I'm going to plug this heavily. We're on Thompson Brothers again, and I did say that we're going to talk about what they're doing up there, but this is a fantastic thing. This has just been reviewed on Dramface too. Dallas did a review on this. This is an 8-year-old blended malt, so there's an age statement on this. It's aged over 8 years, and the reason that they're using that wording is very specific because they're using a Solera vat on this one. So they only empty it down 2/3. So there's always going to be a third left in the bottom. But what they've done here is they've brought together single malt whiskies to make a blended malt using a Solera system. This has gone to market at 35 quid. £35. Now, I've opened it and drank it for the first time tonight, thinking about it. I had a wee dram a couple of nights or a few nights back. In fact, maybe before I went to Isla even. And I've come to it tonight. It's super peaty, and it caught me by surprise. I didn't expect so much peat in it. So they're obviously using there's something peaty in here, but it's just such another example of an easy drinking, delicious blended malt. Forget about the word blended. This is malt whiskey, and it's good value, and it's delicious and drinkable. You could put this in any lineup, and I think people would be flocking to it. You would not be able to pick this out as the budget whiskey at £35. Similar, I think, to your Timorous Beastie in concept. Completely different age. You've got sherry matured. It's not using Solera, but that blended malt bringing that value. How long do you think, Stuart, blended malts are going to struggle from that B word?
It's funny because it's something that I've realised since we did that last vPub as well, is that the blended's almost in certain areas becoming quite beneficial in a way. Because if we do it as malt whiskey, which I completely agree with, I think it's the right thing to do because it has been struggling, and I think it's unfair that it should be struggling from blended. But I think the education side of things and us as a group of whiskey drinkers, the blended is almost becoming beneficial because it's showing that it's multiple different distilleries and showing how good it can be as a category of whiskey. You know, it's almost like that badge of honor, like, yes, we're blended, but we're malt whiskey in a way. But,
yes.
You know, when we look at the larger group of whiskey drinkers globally that don't really understand what blended malt is as a category, it's still going to really struggle. it's still going to really struggle. And the price point is probably the only thing that's going to benefit it. Is, as you said, picking up a £65 bottle of 18-year-old malt as opposed to a £120 bottle of 18 single malt is the one big win for it, right?
And that's, if anybody wonders why you would VAT cash together in order to sell it cheap, you just go back and watch the original vPub that Stuart and I, because that's exactly the scope of that topic 2 years ago. That's exactly what we talked about. So yeah, I think that blended malt, but we all have to. I think what we'd love about single malt is that surgical, laser focused connection with a specific place in the whiskey landscape. And if we, as soon as we consider that it's blended, that kind of, but I think we need to relax a little bit as geeks and understand that what we're actually chasing is flavor.
Yeah.
And in theory, if you take that further, the best flavor experience is probably multiple malts in the hands of somebody who really knows what they're doing in order to create myriad different flavor outcomes from various malt blends. I think that it's suffering from the B word. It certainly is.
Yeah.
I think we just have to live with it. But if you consider how long it's taken the community that you refer to, the educational side of the community, to help people make the distinction between malt whiskey, single malt whiskey and malt whiskey, and blended whiskey, that's taken a while for that penny to drop, right? That it's two different things and they're produced in two different ways. I would go as far to argue that they're two different drinks. But that's happened. That's happened. People understand what malt whiskey is now and what a blended whiskey is now. It's maybe going to take a bit further for people to understand why there's such a thing as a blended malt. Jimmy Legg is saying easy to drink, but still interesting to drink. That's a difficult trick to get right. Absolutely, Jimmy. I hope you're enjoying some of them too. The Timorous Beastie says Helen's Wood, 18-year-old seems to evaporate here too. Lol. And Greg's Whiskey Guide is saying, oh my God, here it's around €100. I don't know. He's probably talking about the Timorous Beastie. I think it's obviously much more expensive than that. But at that time, 2 years ago, there was a special offer going on that 18-year-old.
Yeah.
And you were picking it up at great prices. Ben, Whiskey with Molly, really enjoying the bottle of Thompson Brothers blended malt you gave me. Of course, I gifted you one of these, didn't I, Ben? I hope that you do enjoy it, buddy. I'm really excited to hear that you've opened it and started drinking it already. And Don Miguel is saying the Gauldrons. I was taking this all round. I bought loads of this stuff and I gifted it to loads of folk that were spending time with us in Campbelltown and Islay. Not everybody got this. Apologies. Some people got the Ukrainian Wolfburn or something else from us. But I took loads of this around and gifted it on the island. And hopefully that everybody's opening it and enjoying it as well. Although I didn't realise how peaty it was. It's not. I wasn't. I've given it to people on Islay, a peaty whiskey. I didn't appreciate just how peaty it was.
I wonder if they'll then blend that out or vat that out. I wonder what they'll do with it, if they'll keep it peaty and keep a consistency of peated malt in it, or they'll maybe blend it out and change it.
If we know the Thompson Brothers, right, they've done it very deliberately. So
of course,
absolutely. Yeah. So they probably, I don't know if they're going to. It's going to be nice to keep this, I think, as it waxes and wanes, and see how the batches vary over time. This first batch is only 800 bottles, by the way, but it's 35 quid. You can get it from Thompson Brothers directly. I bought my last few bottles from Nichols and Perks, so this is available out there at 35 quid if anybody's interested in picking it up. But it's just a great, easy drinking wee whiskey for £35. There's nothing to talk about, and it is going to be interesting to see how the contrast, how it morphs and changes that flavour drift over time. The Gauldrons, says Don Miguel, is saying, is delicious stuff. No more Campbelltown anxiety. Campbelltown Loch, the exact same. And there's another one by Hunterling as well. I forget the name of it. They've got their own blended malt from Campbelltown too. Yeah, again, there's ways to connect with Campbelltown whiskies. Again, leveraging exactly Stuart talked about there, the blended malt category. Ian Bruce is saying, would changing the word blend to something else aid or hinder these fantastic bottlings? I argue, Ian, that we just drop it. It's malt whiskey. We just don't need to talk about the fact that it's blended. It's just malt whiskey. Why even use a qualifier? If we want to qualify a single malt, then fine, we use the word single. But otherwise, it's just malt whiskey. And I just, I don't know why it wasn't always like that. And Ian Bruce sorry, Ian again has chimed in. Ian, I feel like it's the first time you're here tonight, and yet you're the one I seem to be connecting with. Nice to have you in. He's saying collaborated malt, fantastic. Sandy McDonald. Yeah, Sandy McDonald is in saying I'm enjoying a Thompson Brothers Dilune 11 years finished in Black Isle Stout cask. Fantastic, Sandy. I hope it is tasty. And Helen is saying on offer around £58 at Aberdeen Whiskies. I think she's probably talking about the Timorous Beastie 18 there. Let's pull up category number 3. Let's start marching through these a bit quicker because we're being a wee bit chatty, I think. It's usually down to me, buddy. It's not you. Number 3. This is when we want to raise the bar a bit. This is when you've got some nice company and you're enjoying some nice time. You say, okay, I've got a wee treat for you. Something that's a wee bit more expensive, a bit of decadence, a bit, you're pushing the boat out a little. You're treating your company. What are you going to pull out?
So this is the last one, I swear to everyone. The last one that's
still on brand. Still on brand. All right, don't worry.
But AnCnoc 18.
Yeah, you're not going to get a lot of arguments here. This was my whiskey of the year in 2020. Absolutely adored the stuff. I have yet to have somebody coming back to me and making a complaint about that recommendation. Everybody seems to love it. There is huge, we know it's natural color because we can see the batch variation in one bottle from one year to the next. It's quite a contrast. Tim Medley, Donner Pass Whiskey, has actually shared some photographs of his different batches there to see the difference in color. Listen, it's malt whiskey. It's a batch made product. This should be celebrated. It's part of the enjoyment of it all. It's wonderful to see these different colors. And you can probably ascertain then that it's natural, which it is, right?
Yeah.
Therefore, you can probably say the Casca, the darker one, is going to be more active. You could probably explore further and say, well, there's a chance it's going to be maybe some European oak or certainly some more sherry matured American oak that's been used in there to make it a wee bit darker. And it just draws you in that wee bit more. There's nothing worse than holding up a glass of whiskey and admiring the color only to discover that it's artificially adjusted to be so. It's one of the things that's robbed from you is that appreciation of malt whiskey, the color of it. I think it's a fantastic whiskey. So I don't mind you being on brand for that one whatsoever. I have not joined you though. I'm going to tell you what I have pulled out for this one in order to discuss something with you a wee bit. But tell us why you've picked the AnCnoc 18, my friend.
I think it's that, just what you talked about is batch variance, and this goes for any whiskies that do it. Kilchoman is another good example of this, is that a lot of people, and it's probably the wider whiskey world as opposed to the whiskey geeks and whiskey lovers, that they look at batch variance and go, oh, that's a different whiskey, and they get really nervous and anxious about it. But and the amount of things I say in tastings and talk about, single malt's technically blended, it's a single distillery, you can put it in a million casks and blend it together, and it's I've ruined Christmas. But for me, it makes it so much more romantic, and it makes it true to form that whiskey is a true art form. It's not science. It's nothing that can be done by a computer. I think there's one in Dubai now that can pass it through and within 95% accuracy say it's, a Springbank 12 or whatever. So that computer will never tell you if it tastes good, if it tastes okay.
That's right.
And that for me, and I'm going on a bit of a tangent here, but it's really talking about how whiskey is a true art form. It really cannot be replicated by computers. Only human beings will ever be able to do this. And one perfect example of this is Gordon Bruce as a distiller. And my God, he's come up a hellish amount of times tonight, but he really loves and cares about this distillery to a point where it impassions not just myself. We've already seen it in the chat, and you talking about it. I can't believe you've not been, but this is a guy that really cares about what he does to a scientific method, an artistry method, and produces stunning new make. And when it goes into cask, I think it produces a really wonderful decadent. And as we talked about earlier, can't remember if we were live or not when we talked about it, it's a Highland style, I would argue. But it is in Speyside, it is in that area. But it produces this very oily but yet floral new make that goes into it. And I think for what we have here, natural colour, 46, non-chill filtered, the colour in that's absolutely stunning. Holding it against.
It is. And I wasn't sure about the colour difference because the level in the lighter one was so low, but the new bottle was much darker. And I just decided, okay, but clearly from the community and Tim and people like that sharing their photos, we can see that difference in colour from batch to batch. And the more that we see that, the more we can relax with it and understand and so much more about the deeper landscape of what whiskey is and its production and what makes it and what puts it together. It's okay for the colours to be different. It's okay for it to cloud when you put a bit of cold water into it. It's okay for all these things. It's really quite a cool, natural thing that we're dealing with. What I'm going to raise up with you is I'm going to counter some of the chat that's inevitably going to come in. Let's see if it's come in while I've been chatting to you. Sandy McDonald's is saying, "Oh no, I got that one, Sandy." Ryan Sutherland has said, "I am a huge buyer of all things Thompson Brothers. Never let down. I hope you can get a hold of it too, Ryan. It's obviously in high demand." Jimmy Legacy saying, "Real whiskey folk don't see colour." Well, I get you, Jimmy. I get what you're saying. But I think it's nice to see the colour and remark on it, regardless of what the colour is. Be ambivalent about the colour.
Yeah.
Recognise it and appreciate it, as long as it can be natural. Ross Brereton is saying, "Just had a bottle of AnCnoc 18 arrive this week. Managed to find it at Kinnaird for £73. Wow, superb price. Thanks for the recommendation, Aquavite." I'm grateful you got it at that price, Ross, as well, because when I gave it Whiskey of the Year, it was down at £70. I'm just about to to shout at my pal here and say and complain about the fact that the price is going up. But it's not just AnCnoc that's going up. It's right across the board. We're seeing this for aged whiskey. Glenn Duncan is saying, "I struggle to understand how the volume of whiskey has increased so much, and yet entire brands are becoming next to impossible to source." Huge Pulteney fanboy. Glenn, the capacity is increased, but it takes 18 years for it to mature to produce the AnCnoc 18 as an example. So we're going to be waiting quite a wee while. And all the while, I think the single malt market continues to grow. It's going to be interesting to see where it goes in the future. I hope that they're keeping up because the pricing is meaning that, unfortunately, as all the folk that can afford it die, where's the youth coming into it, right? We are not making a product that's easy for folk to come in and enjoy if they're pretty young, right? The Thompson Brothers at 35 quid, the Glencadam 10 I've shared tonight at 35 quid. All of these are, but to taste something that's mature and really get an understanding about what happens with whiskey as it matures and it's long in cask, that's becoming a very exclusive club to join, and that's dangerous. Golf is dying on its backside globally right now because they made that mistake years ago, and the youth didn't come into it because it was exclusive, because it was prohibitively priced, and now golf is struggling to get the youth back in again. It's a stupid analogy to pull there, but
why did you think I got into the whiskey industry?
To afford your golf membership, or because you were rubbish? You were rubbish at golf.
Only guy in my family doesn't play golf. Only person in my family doesn't play. They give me free whiskey and they pay me every month. It's the best job in the world.
Yeah. I mean, I'm making comments. I know that was an issue in golf. It's maybe changed now. They've got various youth programs and things going on. But honestly, it was a thing, and kids couldn't afford to get into. They couldn't afford a membership. They couldn't afford the equipment. It was crazy. I'm speaking about a sport that we are actually brought up with in Scotland as well. It's part of the environment. And Ian is saying, "Will Stuart be appearing at Gordon's podcast, Knock Tales?" Gordon has a podcast.
Gordon has a podcast. It's brilliant.
No way.
Yes.
No way.
He interviews people, and it's not just whiskey makers, but it's makers of anything realistic across the world that he kind of sees, a bit of kinship with, and how craft and idealistic it is. He's been doing it for a while now, but he's bloody good at it. But we have things in the pipeline that we're doing just now that I will be appearing on it, but not being directly interviewed. I think that'd be a bit of a redundant conversation between as much as I think I'd love it, but it would be a bit of a redundant conversation. So I will be appearing on it in some way, shape, or form.
Well, that's interesting. I've made a note that I'm going to be going searching the Knock Tales podcast. Fantastic stuff. I'm going to offer up something. How much has the AnCnoc 18 crept up to now from its previous £75 price point? How much are we paying for AnCnoc 18 now, Stuart?
Oh, that's a good question. I think we're still under the £100 mark just now.
It's into the 90s now, though, right?
I believe so. Someone can fact check me on that and let me know. But I believe at retail we're still sitting under £100 mark.
I'm gonna be and I'm not. This is not me in any way. There is no brand agreement. There is no partnership. There is no money will ever change hands. Sorry, between any brand and this channel. I'm doing this of my own volition, and you know that to be true because you've heard me talking about this whiskey regularly on this very vPub, and I'm trying hard to open my third bottle of it, but I'm going to need a blade or something because I've burst the wax. You probably know already what I'm going to open here, Stuart.
I've seen it. I've seen it now. Yeah.
Right. I'm just going to need to brutalize my way in here. This is the third bottle I've opened in a year, and I love this stuff. It is not the same as the AnCnoc 18 that Stuart is holding up, but this is £53 I paid for this. And I would suggest this is getting more sherried all the time. This is, again, one of these, the batch variation in this whiskey is openly embraced, and it should be celebrated as such. This last bottle that I'm just about to open, I think, is the darkest one I've opened yet. But this is Speyburn 15. So if you don't want to pay your 90 odd quid for your AnCnoc 18, my whiskey of the year from 2 years ago, this is a contender of my whiskey of the year for 2022. I am absolutely loving this whiskey. I think it's dense. I think it's ridiculously richly flavored. I think it can be complex. It can switch up on you in the glass. It does a remarkable, is that right under the lens and put that out of the way? It does a remarkable job of being easy to drink and keeping you engaged for £53, £54. Fully natural, 46% ABV, Speyburn 15. So you raise your AnCnoc 18, and I think you would agree with me that you enjoy this one too, right?
Yeah, and genuinely, it's not because, God, it's always hard to defend that position when it's just not because I work for the company. I was introduced to Speyburn maybe a year ago for the first time, realistically, because it's funny when I say to people in the UK or even European market, you know, what brands do you represent? It's like Speyburn, never heard of it. And you get that quite regularly, but if you say to someone from the States, it's, oh, of course, yeah, and, you know, Speyburn's a huge brand, and it's a massive brand in that area of the world, and it's always funny that, but yeah, I was introduced to Speyburn about a year ago, and I didn't, you know, I think it was a 10-year-old I drank at a bar, someone gave it to me, and I was like, it's nice, it's fine. And it wasn't until I started working with Inverhouse, I got into the 15 and the 18, this is really good liquid, this is brilliant liquid. But
this is so under the radar, it's incredible.
And it's just not seen this side of the water, unfortunately. And, you know, Speyburn itself as well, anyone that does tours up Speyside, you'll have probably heard of Speyburn, but we don't have a visitor centre. We're just outside Rothes. So you pass the station hotel, you come to the roundabout, Glen Grant's off to your left. If you go straight, it's just a 5-minute walk from the station hotel. But it's a beautiful, beautiful distillery. It's absolutely gorgeous. But we did the renovation we were talking about in 2016, 2017. And we upped the capacity from 1.6 to, we were saying earlier, I think the capacity is 4.5. I think we've run it at 4.2 Speyburn. And just an interesting fact, I remember, not a fact, Bobby Anderson, who's been our master distiller for 27 years, has just retired. So congratulations, Bobby. Cheers to where we are, wherever he is, actually. And we've just had a new distillery manager, Ewan Henderson, come in. And the reason I mention this, I always think it's quite interesting because we see distillery managers stay for such a long period of time that a change of guard is always quite interesting because, you know, there's attitude shifts and, you know, is the new mixed spirit going to change and what's going to happen? And Ewan has obviously a lot of autonomy in that regard. So I'm looking forward to it. I think it's worth talking about because you rarely see it. You know, it's like an eclipse. It's you know, distillery managers will stay for 20, 30 years.
Yes. Yeah.
So interesting.
Just like an eclipse. Yeah.
Pop to my head.
Whiskey with Molly Ben is saying 91 quid for the AnCnoc 18.
I saw that, yeah.
And Jimmy Legg is saying Knocktails podcast listenership is about to treble. Listen, if anybody wants to drop the link in for Knocktails on Spotify or wherever it may be, by all means, just drop in the link and the admins will clear it, no worries. You can easily buy AnCnoc 18 in Spain, says Don Miguel, for €85. That's about £75, £70, but the same when I suggested it was my whiskey of the year. Billy Abbott's saying a very serious whiskey. I think he's talking about the Speyburn. I would agree with you, Billy. Anthony Lambert is saying €96, £82 here in Germany for AnCnoc 18. And at the moment, having to wait, pulling the trigger, that's a lot of cash for me. Consider the Speyburn, Anthony. honestly, I'd say it's 9/10 of the experience. It's rich and dense like the AnCnoc is. It's not the same whiskey, but if you're looking for something that's wonderful, robust, thick and oily, not a typical Speyside that I would say, consider the Speyside. I've been blown away by it. I'm enjoying the 18, but the 15 is the sweet spot for me. Especially my favorite one was the first bottle, which was the palest and probably the most kind of bourbon focused.
To talk to the, sorry to interrupt, Roy, just to talk to the 15, it's a unique one in our portfolio that it's not recast or re-racked into sherry. It's actually aged 15 years in sherry and aged 15 years in bourbon, which is I think it's an important note for anyone that's looking to taste it. It's 15 years and 15 years then married together, as opposed to bourbon then re-racked into sherry, which is, I think, an interesting point.
That's not as common as you might imagine. Often it's a first fill or refill bourbon maturation finished in sherry. So it's super interesting that you would have the two there, and that gives you total control at the end, right? How much to mix in order to bring it together, how much to vat together in order to bring that balance. Who's in charge of doing this one?
So Stuart Harvey. So it's a team of 3 just now. So Stuart Harvey's our overseer. He's our oracle as it goes. So he's our master blender. But Mark Williamson and Claire Breslin are also responsible for in the blending team. So it's a team of 3 overseers in a lot of regards. But Stuart Harvey's the oracle, as I said. Stuart,
Mark, and Claire. Did you say?
Claire.
They're doing a good job. Keep it up. Whiskey with Molly Ben is saying, yeah, even Speyburn 18 at £75 is lovely. I would agree, and that's another one. So if you can't buy the AnCnoc 18, Speyburn 18 is a slightly more sherry rich. Is there a difference in the maturation with 18? It's much more sherried, right?
The 18,
yeah,
it's funny. It's more sherry influenced than the 15. Because, as much as it's 15 is age 15 years and age 15 years, the proportion isn't, of course, 50-50, which I think, maybe it's misleading to say that it's 15 years, 15 years. It is 15 years, 15 years, but it's not 50-50. But the 18 sees a lot more sherry influence on it to the 15, which is different. You see a lot more of those kind of spicier raisin, cinnamon notes in the 18 as opposed to the 15, which I think is more of those deeper chocolate dried fruit notes of sherry as opposed to the 18.
Sugar Kitty shared the podcast, the Knocktails podcast. It's on the AnCnoc.com website, which is excellent, fantastic. I'm going to be listening to that. That's superb. I'm just going to copy that link right now, and I'm going to paste it in a browser. I have to listen to this. Terrific stuff. Yeah. Okay, I've got that. I need to go through some confirmations and things, and then Anthony Lambert is saying, I'm Googling the Speyburn 18 right now. Thanks for the tip, guys. Hey, don't overlook the Speyburn 15. North Coast Drummer Tony is saying Rothus 1915. Oh, he's talking to Rothus 1959. And he's saying the 50cl bottle is a no-no to Aquavitae. It's not that it's a no-no. I had a Ben Nevis from that boutique whiskey company that was on the trip away. It was Stefan Novak brought a Ben Nevis 1996 22-year-old in a 50cl bottle from that boutique whiskey company, and we were knocked on our backsides by it. It's not, I would prefer it not to be 50cl. I would prefer it to be 70, of course. Terrific stuff, but I'm not against it if it has to be. Let's click on then. We are now in a situation where you have a VIP turned up, okay? Potentially a peer, a fellow whiskey geek, somebody from the industry, maybe somebody that's going to want to really not talk to you about your holiday for the year, not talk to you about where you fancy moving house to in order to have a good school catchment area and all the nonsense. Somebody that you're just going to spend the whole evening talking to about whiskey. A VIP pour. What do you pour for somebody for this point of conversation, something interesting, something where they're going to feel indulged? It's a hard one to pick, is it not?
It's a hard one to pick, and I'm glad that we talked about the whiskey lover coming over to your house as opposed to this is the most expensive whiskey I have, here you go. I'm glad we talked about the
absolutely. This is not about, it can be about price, sure, because that's often closely associated to exclusivity,
of course,
or to all of these things. I mean, but that's not, it can't be defined by price. Absolutely.
So I'm going to show the liquids probably before the bottle, because I think that's the interesting side of this. Is right. That's it there.
Okay. So if we talk about colour, that's a colour to celebrate right there.
So that is a very light colour, and I've had it remarked already. You know, it's whiskey. It's like, yes, that's whiskey. So what we have is a Samaroli Orkney, which I'm assuming we can all guess which one it is, because I don't think Scapa give it out too readily.
Yeah, not even Samaroli gets Scapa, right?
Distilled 2009, bottled in 2020. So 11 years, but obviously it's a vintage, so we don't know guaranteed bottling dates. But this is cask number 1126, 45%, which I thought was quite surprising, actually.
Could be cask strength. You wouldn't know if it's been reduced or not, right?
It must be reduced, because even at 11 years, you're not going to bring it down. I mean, filling strength at Kylan Park, if anyone knows, please tell me, must be around the 64 mark.
Yeah, I suppose. Yeah.
Especially if the wood's been that unreactive. And it's delicious. It's a fantastic dram, but if the wood's been that the least impact, then I wouldn't imagine it's been like that.
And I would also imagine that Samaroli, being Samaroli in the small scale that they are, they're not going to be filtering it, so it's a very deliberate strength at 45.
Yeah.
But you're quite right to talk about, and that's an interesting thing right away, because you're holding up a glass there that's super pale. You can talk about the colour. You can celebrate the colour. Jimmy Legg is jumping up and down in the chat saying, now that's whiskey, with about 5 exclamation marks, right? Because it teaches us that the flavour is not from the colour. Information comes from the colour. We can take pleasure from the colour, but that's not where the flavour is born from. The flavour is born from other things. And so much flavour can be in a very, very light, pale whiskey. In fact, some of my all-time favourite whiskies are super pale. And so much, that's true for most of the chat, no doubt. But then you can talk to them about Samaroli and the history that's there. And then you can talk to them about the fact, well, it says Orkney, but actually they're not allowed to tell you. So there's layers and layers of discussion that you can have, but probably you're going to be pouring this for somebody that's going to need introduction.
Well,
they're going to know all of
this for anyone that's not genuinely interested in whiskey. I do apologise, Roy. I've locked my girlfriend out the flat and I need to open the front door. I'll be back in 2 seconds.
I have plenty folk to keep me busy while you let your girlfriend in. please let her in. Jimmy Legg, aye, now that's whiskey. Danny Hebbington is saying it looks as light as Glencadam 10. Well, it was Glencadam 10, Danny, that I started tonight with. And I would argue that I think that what our Stuart held up there is even lighter than Glencadam 10. I mean, it looks as pale as white wine. And Glenn Duncan is saying, I am a doomed whiskey tragic and golf addict. Not enough dollars to support both, but giving it a crack. And Ian Bruce has said, is this why whiskey colouring needs to be labelled, or it may put folk off lighter drams? Well, I think that, unfortunately, the industry spent years and years and years teaching people that dark whiskies are where it's at. And now there's a lot of kind of teasing that apart against, a bit of separating that spaghetti from the sauce in order to teach people that colours to be celebrated regardless of what the colour is. Pale whiskies can be absolutely stunning too. In fact, they very often are. And Jimmy Legg, who's celebrating his Pink Barfly membership for 29 months, says, listening to podcasts to learn some new profanity. I wonder, you can't be swearing on his podcast, not if it's on
No, there's none. We've edited it heavily.
Aye. Jimmy, just hang out with us on a wee whiskey trip over the course of a week. As all our foreign friends will testify, in order to learn profanity. There was much profanity shared over the tour over the last couple of weeks, and it was great fun too. So that is an interesting one. I have to ask you though, was it rude to say how much such a thing would cost? Samaroli is not an easy thing to get your hands on now.
I was actually gifted this, to be fair. And
okay, you can therefore dodge the question.
My conscience has never looked out, but if anyone wants to let me know in the chat, I can't control not seeing that. But at Samaroli, you're always looking at the price range is up there. And I think that's one of those ones that I've always wanted. Samaroli's always the beautiful labelings on them, and this one I think is stunning. Very
often that Art Deco feel.
I've always really enjoyed them, but they are, as we all know, the price point is up there. You're paying an extra 20-30%, what have you, for a Samaroli. The one thing I'm surprised is that you don't know the cask on this, because I think for roughly 11 years, as we know, it's a vintage. That is drastically light. but the influence from the cask is very heavy. There's a lot of influence in the cask. This is nowhere near New Make Spirit. There's not that kind of rum agricole, pineapple-y concept to it. It's very soft and it's very delicate. There's almost like a cotton candy element to it. So the cask has had a huge impact on the flavour, but colour, it's amazing how light it is.
I remember that we teased doing a wee sample exchange, and I apologise because it's only just this moment that I've realised I said I was going to send you a couple of samples and I completely forgot. We live in the same town together, so it can happen. But as you talk about that, and sorry, I'm almost inviting myself to a sample of your Samaroli. But it's almost like that thing that you, to have such a pale whiskey and try and convince somebody that it's not tasting just like spirit, it's a difficult thing, right? It's a difficult thing. I can see you doing the contrast thing and nosing backwards and forwards as well.
Just to see heavily impact cask versus low impact, because it's, you know, again, when we look at age and color, when it's it's no caramel coloring, is that you can see a heavily extractive cask versus a low extractive cask, and it's just interesting to see, going back to something that's very heavily extractive, just to see how much that nose has changed, and it is quite drastic. It's interesting.
Aye, and you know that idea that we've talked about it enough. Color is there to be celebrated. If you can look at a pale whiskey and say, you know, there is cask influence here. This is 11 years old, that one was, you said?
It's distilled 2009, bottled 2020. So we're looking at 11, but we can't guarantee the bottle.
10 or 11 years, yeah, no problem. But it's long enough for even a quiet cask and the spirit to, you know, let the environment, let time, let all of these other things have a hand and develop the whiskey and bring it on somewhat, so you're not tasting something that's just raw and spirity. And that in itself is a really interesting angle to come along. The fact that it's a Samaroli is a nice story and a tale too. It sounds like you're enjoying it, right?
Yeah, and as I said to you earlier, you know, the first person I brought over to dram this, the immediate mark was, what amazing colour. How the hell did that happen? Did you say this was bottled heat? You know, that was the reaction I wanted. It wasn't
exactly.
Going,
yeah.
Wait, that's whiskey? No, that's that's vodka and gin. You know, the reaction was, what a brilliant colour. How
excitement, yeah.
It was the excitement of talking about something genuinely, I think it's quite fascinating. I don't know, I mean, you know, working with Douglas Lane, you saw so many of, you know, 10-year-old, 9-year-old, 8-year-old. None were as light as that. None. You know, that looks like 6 months in a cask almost.
Ian Bruce is wondering if the bottle is coloured so as not to, it's not clear for someone to identify the colour.
I mean, you can imagine so, right?
I wonder, because then, but that means that when they open it and pour it, they're disappointed. I mean, I would say that there might be some strategy to that, but so many Samaroli bottles are black or dark or opaque. So I would say that it's kind of part of the brand. Fabio has bought me a wee dram, Fabio Caviero. He's saying, welcome back, Roy. Amazing vPub. Fabio, thank you very much, and thank you very much for the dram as well. And Jimmy's saying, I sent it to Stuart. He's welcome, so he sent the podcast link. So you as if perhaps you didn't already have it.
I've listened to every single one of them, but I'll happily do it again.
Terrific stuff. We've only got one more to share. That's quite an interesting pick for a VIP pick, and I think you've nailed it perfectly there, because the VIP thing is not about grabbing your most exclusive, your most precious, your most expensive. It's about bringing something that probably you can only share with another whiskey geek, right? Somebody
and for me, this is one of my most exclusive, because not of the price point. I mean, obviously we know the price point of Samaroli's, right? But it's how interesting it is that, you know, I know for a fact, like, I'm probably not going to get that ever again. I'm never going to see that again. But the color of it, I think, is the most fascinating part. So for me, it is it's one of my most precious liquids in the shelf, because it is one that I want to share with whiskey lovers as opposed to just pour for anyone. It's got to be, you know, someone's got to come around and show off their whiskey knowledge for me to pour that in their glass.
Aye, somebody that you trust. It's a precious drop, and you're going to get a bit of engagement out of it. He said, "Oh no, no, I sent him the Samaroli. I'm sure he'll verify that." Jimmy Legg sent you the Samaroli? That can't be right.
No, this was a gift from my girlfriend.
So unless you're Stuart's girlfriend, Jimmy, and unless you were just very, very recently locked out of his flat, I think we're getting our
Jimmy.
wires crossed. Jimmy. Jimmy Legg is our friend Blair. He's in Nova Scotia. He's definitely not your girlfriend, so it's definitely, I'm getting my wires crossed. Ian Bruce is saying, that's Agavide. That's why I really enjoy this community. Never seen a Samaroli before. So glad to be extending my whiskey knowledge. No, we lost... was it Vincenzo was his name? I'm trying to remember his first name.
I think Billy said it in the chat just a bit earlier. Just trying to see it there.
Billy Abbott.
Yes.
I can't remember his first name.
Silvano Samaroli. Silviano.
We lost him a few years ago. But his ability to pick casks, and this was way before picking casks was really a thing, was legendary. And he took a lot of some of the most precious bottles over to Italy back in his day and built such an unbelievable reputation. The brand still exists. And obviously, as Stuart's just demonstrated, releasing some cool stuff. Gordon Dundas is in, saying, Stuart, I'm popping round. Good to see you, Gordon. I hope you're keeping well, buddy.
Doors firmly locked, Gordon.
Sorry?
Doors firmly locked, Gordon.
You're locked out. Just like his girlfriend. If he locks his girlfriend out, the chance of you getting Gordon is slim. As handsome as you are, buddy. Danny Heaventon is saying 255 whiskey geeks on their way around to Stuart's house. Absolutely. And Billy Abbott is confirming Silvano. Cheers, Billy. Thanks very much. Right, we've got the last one. And for the last one, Stuart, I need you to bring something that you reach for. And you know what this feeling is? When you're looking for something that's just going to grab you, something that's a flavor bomb, something that's bold, something that's going to switch up a flight, something that's going to distract the conversation, something that's going to have a noob tasting it and saying, this isn't a whiskey as I understand it. I can taste something different in this. It doesn't need to be high ABV or whatever, but we're looking for bold flavors. We're looking at something that's a flavor bomb. What are you gonna pick?
So the reason I ended up ending up with this bottle, I did a tasting with a pot still, me and an old colleague of mine, Jamie, and we went along to tasting. And the whole point of doing that tasting was to encourage and get these guys to enjoy our whiskies, right? So we came back, and the next day spoke to our boss, and he said, "How'd the tasting go?" It's great. We ended up buying 2 bottles of whiskey they recommended on Amazon. It's like, right, so you did the opposite of your job. So this is one, I actually don't know a huge amount of the background, and the chat will be able to actually reveal a lot more light. So this is the Cheg Sinclair series, 46.3. I can only imagine, it's an awkward number, but it must be reduced down. But this is, as far as I'm aware, Rioja cask finish. The colour on it has got this lovely pinkish hue, but this, for me, is, I'm sorry to anyone from Cheg, this is Frazzles in a glass. It is. I don't
think you should apologize for that thing. I get it completely. I don't know the whiskey you're talking about. I've not tried it, but I know the flavour note. It's Frazzles in a glass. So that's for anybody that's outside of the UK. Frazzles is a bacon flavoured. I think it's a corn snack that we have in the UK. It's but it's heavily flavoured. And
it's got this made to look like lovely pinkish hue that you only really see from wine. You see it in other places, but you only really see from wine casks. And I don't think I'm really doing it justice. You might be able to see it on camera.
Yeah, if the camera doesn't pick it up, we're looking for magenta highlights, right? That kind of thing that wine casks does to whiskey. Yeah,
and price point is. Someone check now. I think I paid maybe £31 for this. Please correct me if I'm wrong. It might have changed. I bought this quite a while ago. Actually, I've been nursing it.
So this is their non-age statement, Lechik, right?
Yeah. So Lechik Sinclair series, rich peat, smoke and spice. They're calling it 46.3, which I think is a really good ABV for it. I'd love to see it higher, obviously, but I think that's.
I'm okay. Yeah, I'm good with that as well. So as well as the savoury, are you getting much of the wine cask? Are you getting the tannins to come through?
You know, it's funny. See, when you take this onto the palate, I think the wine cask almost disappears, but that's not why, for me, that's not why it's in a wine cask. When you're on the nose, it's got this lovely kind of velvety and subtlety to it. And obviously it's that anticipation, it's almost like the Jaws 2-note, Dana. You smell something in the background, something's coming, and that's going to be in the palate. But on the nose, it's this quite delicate, almost like velvet-esque nose, and then as soon as you take it onto the palate, it's that burst open, and everything kind of reveals itself as a classic Cheg in a lot of ways.
And I think that if you talk about something like a wine cask, there can be a very prominent flavor influence from that wine cask on whiskey. Some people love it, some people don't like it so much, but if you're going to do it, a peated style of whiskey works best with it, I think. Something that's quite robust, a robust spirit.
Yeah, and for me, and we talked about this earlier, it's not my guilty pleasure, but the flavour profile I think I most enjoy in Scotch whiskey, and it will be that kind of end of the night, is sherried or port or wine, but peated version of it. Peated sherry, peated port, peated wine is right up my street for a final end of night.
It just works. It just works. Sometimes, especially a really active cask from fortified wine or anything like that, dialed up to 11, the peat dialed up to 11, vatted, put together with a careful hand. It's brutal. You're not sitting there searching for the distillery character. Everything is bold. Everything is out there. It's really an extrovert whiskey, but it just works. And there's a place for everything, right? We can talk about purity and subtlety and distillery character as long as we want. But when it comes down to it, what we're really enjoying is flavor. And if the flavor comes in that way, then so much the better. Ben, Whiskey Geek, is saying, I sent you a sample of that blind for the supermarket whiskey vPub a few weeks ago. The pink whiskey. Apologies, Ben. Of course you did. That shows you. I'm glad you're here, Ben, to keep me right. I do. I remember that. Thanks, Ben. Thanks for reminding me too. Ben, Whiskey with Molly, saying this is a £32 whiskey. It's amazing value. So there's Ben backing you up as well. Yash Desai is saying, you've tried it, Roy, during your last blind tasting with Ben. My goodness. Do you think I watch my own videos? Yeah. I'm relying on my memory, which is getting weaker and weaker all the time. Andrew Pierce is saying it's definitely not as winey as some of the wine casks can be. It's lovely stuff. Aquavite, says Andrew Pierce. Good to see you, and Andrew as well. Fantastic. It looks like David Brodie is in as well, because I can see our pal Time for a Dram Gregor is talking directly to David Brodie. If David Brodie is part of, he's at Bunnahabhain, of course, but is part of the Distell stable, which also on Tobermory that makes Lechick too. David, if you're in, thanks for your welcoming hospitality last week, and it's good to welcome you behind the bar. Everybody remembers everything on the internet, Aquavite, says Jimmy Legg. Maybe I need to spend a wee bit more time considering my own content. I'm glad I've got you guys here to keep you right. That's a good, interesting one to finish on, and I'll tell you why. It's available and it's inexpensive to everyone, right?
Yeah.
You've not, the AnCnoc's gone up in price. It hasn't gone out of reach. The old Pulteney 18 has gone out of reach for us. It has. I'm speaking from me personally. There's lots of people that are going to buy it, but I think the old Pulteney 18 is up at 120, 125 now. Balblair is kind of creeping up a wee bit too. It's not quite at old Pulteney, but we've seen the prices creeping up there. But I think your range generally, and I think we've proved it tonight with the Huddart, honestly. And if we look at Balblair, the 12 and the 15-year-old that I have over there too, your range generally still has affordable products for us. We can cry about the rebranding, we can cry about products lost as much as we like, but it's not just Inverhouse that are going through these necessary changes based on a reflection of the stocks that's available, the depth of the stocks, the range of the stocks, all of these things. But it's the ability to keep a range of products that can still bring people in that don't have 85, 105, 125 pounds to spend on whiskey. And that is still very much a thing. If I could ask two favours of you, one, I know you have no say on this whatsoever, but I'm going to say it for the sake of saying it out loud. Keep Brad Norak at 40%, no problem. Make the 10-year-old natural, please. Speyburn. AnCnoc 12, I'm not going to ask the same. I have a love for that whiskey, and it's doing what it's doing at £28 at 40%. I don't touch it. It's doing a good thing. I do have a problem with the AnCnoc range, though, and that's something that's missing. It's two things that's missing in the AnCnoc range. One, an age statement that's to fill that gap between 12 and 18. You're nodding. And this, it's not just Knock do. It's not just AnCnoc that has this problem. It's whiskey generally. We have forgotten the bourbon cask. We really, really have. Now, I appreciate that what we've talked about tonight, we've talked at length about casks and how that they're matured separately and married and all these things. I think this is one of the biggest neglected things in malt whiskey. A lovely, well-aged, well-balanced, elegant, beautifully flavoured, fruity, lots of time left alone in a bourbon. First fill, fine, preferably refill for the right amount of years, just all of it to make something as close to perfect as this.
Yeah.
What I asked Gordon directly, why? And he said, stock. Just, we don't have the stock. We can't keep doing it. That can still be the case. We're 5 or 6 years on now. Is there any chance that this can ever come back again?
This is rock and a hard place for me because I genuinely cannot talk about it. The only thing I can say is things are going to change very quickly with AnCnoc, with the lineup and with the SKUs and with the core range. That things are going to happen. That's genuinely all I can say because I will get in trouble.
Okay.
So things are changing with regards to the core range and that gap that you were talking about. Let's just say that. With regards to the bourbon cask, the one thing I love about Gordon, if Gordon could put AnCnoc at cost price, fill it into bourbon and offer it at cask strength, that's all he would do. That's all he would do. He's just an absolute rock star. I remember the first time meeting him going up to the distillery, and Gordon has no time for marketing. He's all about the liquid, which I absolutely appreciate. I remember the first time going up and he was told, right, you've got your new ambassador coming up. And he was like, right, I could, rolling his eyes. And we went up, and this is the interesting thing I wanted to bring up because I think it's absolutely fascinating from a whiskey geek point of view. We're walking around the distillery and we're talking, and it was, he was kind of warming up and understanding that I knew a little bit about whiskey. And then we get outside and we go up to the worm tub and we climb up. And then I look, I was like, Gordon, is that a shell and tube condenser on its side running into a worm tub? He's like, oh yeah. Does anyone else do that? Even not that I know of. And I was asking, I was like, so when the hell did you come up with that? He's like, I had a bit of back pain, so I was on some pretty strong drugs, and that wasn't even my first idea. And as soon as I mentioned that and I started talking about it, hopefully I've won him over a little bit and have, because I think he's absolutely fascinating. I think he's an absolute genius. But with regard to the bourbon cask, and answer your question directly, is that there's a desire internally to do it, but genuinely the stocks at AnCnoc are not massive. They really aren't. And even after 5-6 years, and now that we're talking about the core range, and I've had a few drams and I can't really go into it, or I might misspoke, but there are things coming and we have to consider the stock levels for that as well. But there is an internal desire to bring back 100% bourbon AnCnoc because it is damn
superb.
Good representation of AnCnoc.
It's superb.
Yeah.
And that kind of unique AnCnoc thing that's difficult to articulate is here. For me, it's a wee bit clovey, occasionally mineralic. But this is beautifully fruity, delicate, balanced, quiet, easy to drink. But if you were sitting on your own and you had peace and quiet, you could sit all night with a glass of this stuff. And this is all I have left now. There's somebody who was a bit of an enabler for me. He's still in the chat right now. If you can get any more of this for me, buddy, I would take some more from you. I love this stuff, and I love talking about it, and I love sharing it, and I think it's just a terrific thing that's not easy to find. Exclusively bourbon matured core range whiskey.
Yeah. And as you say, refill bourbon, right?
Yes. So it's that time thing has come into it. It's not all about the cask. You'd argue that 12 years and beyond is. I picked up a Fashil Bamor, actually. It was the only bottle I bought on the whole of my time on Isla. I was there for a week and I bought one bottle. I had to really watch what I was doing money-wise, and I bought one. I felt it was good value, £135 of Bamor. It was first fill bourbon in 15 years. I tried it first before I bought it, just to make sure it was okay. And I'll spend a bit more time making up my mind about it. But at that age, you're really looking for it to be at least a significant proportion to be refill. because it's quite a long time for it to be in the cask, and the casks are too active. It can just all be a story about the cask, and suddenly the balance is lost, the subtlety, the character of the spirit is lost a wee bit. But this, when the Whiskey Rev and I were drinking this back in the day, we would not pour this for casual visitors. Because it's subtle. We knew it would be lost on so many folk coming round. You know, it was just people that are just stepping in and they're looking for hooks. This doesn't give you a hook. This gives you something very, very subtle and specific. Yeah. And once you get a taste for it, it's kind of hard to replicate. I know that you bought out the 125 anniversary edition, 125 years anniversary edition, but it was quite expensive, about £100. It was a 16-year-old as well. And I think it was a nod to this expression. What we really want is something close to this back again, if I could make a request. But I know that neither of us, and not even Gordon, is in control. And Jimmy Legg is saying that whiskey is a crooner. And if Jimmy Legg loves it too, then it must be a good one. Refill bourbon fabulous, says Gordon Dundas. Gordon, I and we agree. Fantastic. Buddy, I was going to suggest that we play a game as a Speyside, but we're 2 hours 15 in.
Oh, we're over.
Well, we're not. There's no such thing as over in the vPub. I don't, let's do it. Have you got a bottle? Did you prepare a bottle, a core range?
Not a Speyside?
No, it can be anything at all.
Okay, then yeah.
You've got a core range, but it's called Is It a Speyside? Is just the name of the game, because that tends to be, if you ask that question first, you're wiping out half of the Scotch whisky landscape by taking out Speyside or focusing on Speyside, right? So that's why it got the name Is It a Speyside? But that's just the name. If you want to play it, let's just play it.
Okay.
We'll just it's the vPub. If you're watching on the replay, use the timestamps below if you're not interested in this part of the game. But I've got 10 questions to try and guess what core range product Stuart has got off screen. Stuart, you have not shared it with me. I don't know what it is. I'm just going to pull this up to show you. Anybody that wants to play along can play for this wee glass topper. You can't buy these. You can't. The only way to get them is to come on and play the game. And win yourself a wee glass topper. You're playing along in the chat. If you guess first, you win it, and you can play along. Let's just give it a try. All I'm going to ask, Stuart, it's definitely a single malt Scotch whiskey. It's core range, and you know the details about it. You know its geography, its owner, its ABV, and all that kind of stuff, right? So any question that I ask about it,
yeah, to an extent, right? We'll do our best.
You do our best. You can answer yes or no to it. Let's see how we go on then. This is your first time playing this, right?
This is my first time playing this. Yeah, I'm going to show myself up. We'll do it. We'll do it.
That's all right. We'll get by. Stuart, is it a Speyside?
No.
It's not a Speyside. Is it a Highland?
No.
Oh. Is it a Campbelltown?
Yes.
Oh, yeah, beauty.
I knew it was buggered. I thought they would maybe select that last.
Some of the sugar kitties already shouted Glen Scotia Victoriana. Fantastic. Okay, is it owned by Janie Mitchell?
Don't know.
So that means that if it's Glengyle or Springbank or one of their brands, it is. And if it's Glen Scotia, yes, it is not. Did you answer there?
Yes, sorry, it is.
It is owned by Janie Mitchell. Does it have an age statement?
Yes.
Is it a Springbank?
Yes.
Okay, so they're all 46% ABV apart from the 12 cask strength and some others, but it's core range we're focusing on. So let's just go age statements here. Is it Springbank 15?
Yes. You know why I thought I would trip you up is that I left the box.
Well,
I left the box here and I kept a bottle.
Fantastic. Do you know, it's in the corner of my eye all night has been that green Springbank 15.
You would have noticed it. I knew you would have noticed it. And it's like, there's no way he's going to pick the Springbank 15.
Hey, you made it too easy. Let's see. Is there any way we can zoom in and see? Springbank 15 from Yash Desai. Oh, Whiskey with Molly Ben got in there ahead of him. Oh, Helen got ahead of him. Helen, you're in the lead, I think. Springbank 15. Helen, I think you may have snagged it. Oh no, Julian Rickman was way ahead. When everybody was still in Speyside and Highlands, Julian came in with Springbank 15. I think he spotted the bottle on yourself as well and went for it. What a great game. Nora Lex is saying, I love this game. I love it too when I win it as easily as that. I think he played softball with me. Let's see if I've played softball with Stuart and all of you guys as well for the quiz at the end. We'll rattle through this as quick as we can. There's no way we're going to make 2 hours now. We're 20 minutes over. We're not even going to make 2.5 hours, but that's okay. As I said at the start of the show tonight, it's the vPub and we don't really worry about those things. Are you okay to stay for the quiz at the end, Stuart?
I've got nothing else to do. I've got nothing else to do.
Fantastic. Well, I'm sure that's not true, but you're happy to stay till the end. I'm sure you're a busy fella tomorrow as well. Helen is confirming that Julian Rickman won a wee coin. Helen is supporting me. Helen is helping me make sure that all of these get shipped. I'm very delinquent because I wasn't keeping up with who was winning it in the chat for so long. But Helen's done a lot of admin in the background. Helen, you're a superstar, and I love you for it. So she's got a list of people that I am due to ship these coins to. And Julian Rickman, you join that wee list, and I'll ship this out to you with a wee note from me to say thanks very much and congratulations. Captain Bamus is in saying, made it back briefly for the quiz. You have, buddy. You've made it just in time. And Ben Whiskey with Molly is saying, no rush, Aquavite, no work tomorrow, and I won't be doing a jot of work. Fantastic. And we just retracted that message as I read it out. Perhaps he didn't want his gaffer to read or hear that. Sorry, Ben, if I've dropped you in it. And Jimmy Legg is saying, Doc said Springbank 15, 2 minutes into the vPub. Oh, wow. Oh, wow. I wonder if that could have been sniped from the longest distance ever. Let's wait and see what Helen has to say about that. Helen is our new judge and adjudicator, but she's allowed to play along too. Anyway, buddy, you know about the quiz at the end. It's always multiple choice. It's meant as a bit of fun. The first 5 questions should be easy. If they're difficult, read the question carefully and consider it that way. Consider the answers in the context of the question. From the picture question onwards, it should get a wee bit more tricky and it should get a wee bit harder. And then we end on an asshat question, which is deliberately meant to be belligerently, obtusely difficult and awkward and horrible. That's just the way it is. It's the way that these things have developed. The pass mark is always 5 out of 10, buddy, so wish you the best of luck. I think you're onto a good thing because I've dropped in a couple of, let's say, Inverhouse brand questions from memory. I think I did. Just Doc is saying he just spotted the box on the shelf.
Box on the shelf, the bottle's here.
So maybe he was just pointing it out. Maybe he was just pointing out the Springbank 15. I don't know if it was an entry into Is It a Speyside. But Doc, if it was, that would be something epic. Fantastic. Good luck, everybody. This is the quiz at the end. Remember, you're only playing against yourself. If you want to use the crowd to crowdsource some answers, by all means, be my guest. You're only playing against yourself, as I say, and the pass mark is always halfway, 5 out of 10. Let's bring it in. You ready? You strapped in, Stuart? Question 1.
I am indeed.
Which of these distilleries? I'll suggest that you don't answer it straight away, and just because the lounge are going to need a wee bit of time on some of these, I guess. Which of these distilleries has recently been sold to Elixir Distillers? This is very recent news, quite exciting. I don't know what everybody's opinion is on this, but I'm excited by it. But one of these distilleries has been sold to Elixir. Elixir is Sukhinder Singh and Raj Singh, of course, his brother. They sold the Whisky Exchange to Pernod Ricard, of course, building Port Natrun on Islay. But they've recently bought either A, Tormore, B, Milton Duff, or C, Ben Nevis. What have they purchased? I was excited by this news. Were you, Stuart?
Yeah, so I think this is one of the most beautiful, in a very industrial way, but one of the most beautiful distilleries in Scotland.
I agree.
And it's so well manicured. The whole area around it is so well manicured. And I've actually been very fortunate enough to be toured around it as well, which is very fortunate. But I think it's absolutely gorgeous. And again, it's not necessarily pretty. but very traditionally industrial, very, very beautiful.
Yeah, I agree. And if that hasn't helped everybody, everybody seems to know what this is. It was big news. It was shared while we were away on our trip, but it was big news and quite exciting news as well. And it's kind of almost one of those things that you go, I wish I'd thought about that beforehand, because it just makes sense. Anyway, what would you guess it is, or what are you saying it is, Stuart?
Tormore, A.
Absolutely spot on. And most of the lounge absolutely knew that. No Rolex is admitting it looks like A, so he's going along with it. Absolutely. If you're unsure, wait a wee minute and go with the crowd. David Brodie, Gordon Dundas, Hoyt Hemphill, Anthony Lambert's Cool Running, and James DeGiulio, he corrected me while we were on Isla, all answered A, absolutely. Question 2, which is the only international beverage, so that's Inverhouse I'm talking about there, which is the only in Inverhouse distillery not to feature worm tub condensers, not to have worm tubs. 4 out of 5 distilleries have worm tubs, which is the only one not to have it. If you get this wrong, Stuart, you'd have a wee red face, right? Is it A, Balminac, B, Balblair, or C, Pulteney? Tell me, how would you pronounce A?
Balmenic.
Balmenic. So if I say Balminac, you would say Balmenic, right?
It's probably through adaptation, you know. Some people have adopted that saying, as opposed to it's something that I would say off the bat. But I would say Balmenic.
Balmenic. Okay.
I'm glad you didn't put Knock Doon here, because that would have been a bit of a contentious answer now.
Well, based on what you just said, that it has shell and tube and worm tub, it still counts. Yeah. It still counts. But is it, which does not feature worm tubs? Is it A, Balmenic, B, Balblair, or C, Pulteney? The crowd, the lounge, all seem to think that Balblair does not feature worm tubs. What would you say, Stuart?
It is indeed Balblair.
Absolutely. Balblair is the only one out of the 5. Diageo is also a guardian of worm tubs, but they don't have anything like the proportion that you guys do with 4 out of 5. I think Diageo are just...
Is it 19 distilleries? Me and Gordon Bruce would is it 19 distilleries that still have worm tubs? And we've got 4 out of our 5 distilleries have worm tubs, but obviously the ratio is crazy. But 19 distilleries that still have worm tubs, but again, that's a rough guess.
Well, I don't know. I mean, there are some, like, you know, Ardnahoe and Isla, Portnatroon's going to be putting in worm tubs as well. So the number is actually likely to grow, which is interesting.
Yeah.
Question 3. Which of these distilleries features a distinctive dark blue hooded open cast iron mash tun? So these cast iron mash tuns, there's a few out there, Brookladdy, Deanston, a few of them have these open cast iron mash tuns. What I'm looking for is specifically a dark blue one with a cover on top. I saw it for the first time and considered it might be quite unique. I hope that helps people. A, is it Clydeside in Glasgow? Is it C, Brookladdy on Isla? Or is it C, Glen Scotia in Campbelltown? So this is an open cast iron mash tun, but there's a canopy over the top of it. And I had no idea that there was such a thing. I don't know what purpose it actually serves. If it keeps in, you know, some of the heat and things. It's certainly open. It's widely vented around it. It's not a closed canopy. It's not Lauter. It's not full Lauter tun. It's still open. I can see you're suddenly puzzled a wee bit.
No, the reason I'm puzzled is, like, obviously I can see the C's popping into the chat now, but my logic is Clydeside's far too modern to have cast iron mash tun. Brookladdy's obviously not going to have navy blue when they could paint it, you know, that lovely teal. So Glen Scotia makes the most sense, but I honestly didn't know the answer to this. But, you know, power of, you know, just reduction.
Well, remember I said to you the first 5 are intended to be easy, even if it's a difficult question. So by process of elimination, you can usually get there, and it seems like you've done that perfectly, along with the lounge. Absolutely. Glen Scotia has this thing, and I've tried to capture a picture of it from a video I took. It's difficult to see, but here's the open mash tun, and this is a canopy. This is a hood over the top of it. So you still stick your head in and have a good old look at the rakes and things, and it was silent when we were there. But this big, heavy iron hood over the top of it, it must be quite unique. I don't know of another one out there. So there you go. 3 out of 3 for Stuart. It seems like 3 out of 3 for most of the lounge tonight as well. Let's see how much we can continue that. Question 4. A new distillery has been announced this week, reviving distillation in which Scottish city? This was very interesting. Which Scottish city is going to have distillation back very, very quickly? Is it A, Dundee, B, Perth, or C, Inverness?
Okay, I think I know this. And the reason I think I know this, I was out with a certain couple of guys having a drink and chatting about it.
In said town, no doubt.
In said town.
Yes, yes.
So this is an educated guess, because I don't know, but I think I know.
This sounds like it's good enough. Which town were you out drinking in, and what makes you think it's this one?
I was out with the guys at the malt room in Inverness. And I
so you think that distillation is, after the loss of Milburn, Glenalbyn and Glenvoer, you think that distillation is coming back to Inverness, which is C, which is also... Jimmy Legge saying it would be nice if it was Perth though, right? Absolutely. Dures, Bells, Globe. It would be amazing to get distillation back in Perth, but it is indeed Inverness. I was interested because there was talk of a Glenvoer Hotel micro distillery. It came out at the start of this year, and I haven't heard anything since. They were going to do a brewery, then they switched it to a micro distillery. So I don't know if they've had a problem with that, but it's looked like this is a genuine, legitimate thing. I've got an image here. I thought this could be an artist's impression, but as I zoomed in and looked at this is too good an image to be an artist's impression. I think this is a photo which suggests that things are very mature. So it's another Lochlee. It's one of these under the radar things. And this is Ulevecht, I think is they're pronounced it, Ulevecht, which is Gaelic for the monster. So it seems to be very well invested, £6 million project. And it seems like it could be distilling very, very soon this year. Distillation of malt whiskey back in Inverness. Fantastic stuff.
Beautiful distills, aren't they?
Yeah. This brings us to the picture question. And as far as I can ascertain, this is not an artist's impression. This is a genuine picture, but the tarmac and everything and the manicured grass there makes it look like it is. But no, this is... I did pick this one from the internet tonight. I should have put a credit up, but I forgot. But I'm just going to ask you which distillery we're looking at. Quite distinctive glazing there. Is it A, Clynelish, B, Colilla, or C, Linkwood? I think it's pretty easy based on process of elimination. But Billy Abbott is clearly on 4 out of 4, as we would expect. David Brown, it looks like a new name, David. It's nice to welcome you in. I hope it is a new name. Hopefully I'm not making a mistake. 4 out of 4 as well. Well done. James DeGiulio is counting himself 5 out of 5 already. Very confident on this one. Whiskey with Molly Glenn Anderson. With the Whiskeyographer, that looks like another new name. Gabriel Welding, good to see you, Gabriel. Robert G, 4 out of 4. Good to welcome you in, Whiskeyographer. Andrew Butler on 4 out of 4. Of course, Andrew, good to see you, buddy. And Beam on 3 out of 4. He's slipped up along with Captain Bamis, Danny Hebbington, and Barter Hordes have both had a wee slip up. Do you recognise this one, or are you struggling a wee bit, Stuart?
No, I will have to, succumb a point. Genuinely didn't know.
What are you going to go with?
I would have gone with A, but I genuinely didn't know, which is terrible.
It is. It does look a wee bit Clynelish.
I'm being honest, because the amount of C's that I saw come into the chat, that's me genuinely being honest. I could have lied.
Aye, you can't buy integrity, big guy. Fair play to you, but it is, in fact, Linkwood. It is Linkwood. Now, Linkwood is one of these distilleries that, depending on where the angle of the shot is taken, because there's another gable end at Linkwood that is not rendered like that. It's a natural stone gable end. It's a bit narrower, and it really does switch up. It looks completely different. And I think from this angle, because of that glazed panel, it is very reminiscent of the Colilla architecture, the Clynelish architecture. I can never remember the name of the architect there. So that's why I stuck those options in tonight. So so your first slip up, so you're on 4 out of 5 and doing very, very well. Question 6. This is a Dramface themed thing, but it's a general news story. You don't need to pick this up on Dramface, but it was reported in Dramface last week. Maureen Robinson steps down as master blender after 45-year career in whisky. But who was Maureen working for? Was it A, Edrington, B, Chivas Brothers or Pernod Ricard, and C, Diageo? A, Edrington, B, Chivas Brothers, or C, Diageo? Alistair McPhail is in, scoring a 5 out of 5. Good to see Alistair. Good to see you doing well in the quiz as well. I hope you're well, buddy. Whiskey with Molly Ben is scoring a 5 out of 5 as well. Gordon Dadas has slipped up twice, but he's big enough to admit it, and he's on a 3 out of 5. Good for you, Gordon. Robert G is on a 5 out of 5 as well. Another new name, Robert. I hope you're doing well. Nice to welcome you in here. Okay, let's have it. Stuart, are you guessing or do you know this one?
Guessing, but I think I'm going for the wider net guess, which is Diageo.
It's a good strategy. Maureen Robinson. Interestingly, they didn't use the word retire in the press release. I don't know if that's a modern thing, but she's stepping down after 45 years. Quite incredible career. And she is absolutely she is Diageo, and she will be ex-Diageo when she retires. So there you go. 45 years.
That's amazing, isn't it?
Amazing to hear the stories, right? Sit down and just hear the...
There's not many industries in the world that have that level of commitment to the industry, let alone...
Yeah, and it's going to be interesting to see, because I think there's a lot more kind of promiscuity going on in roles. There's a lot more kind of switching of roles. You know, you're still in your 20s, right? And you're on your third whiskey employer already, right? So it's going to be interesting to see. I think it's going to be a harder thing to achieve going forward. But she was a bit of a trailblazer by all accounts as well, Maureen. Question 7. In which year was Springbank's current iconic 10-year-old launched? We need to get Maureen on the vPub, says Molasses. Now that she's away for Diageo, do you think we could tease some tales out of her? Mike, do you think that could happen? And Billy Abbott is saying she's responsible for most of the Diageo whiskies you've ever liked. Billy, I don't doubt that for a second. That would be quite incredible. And Helen said, be another great vPub guest, Roy. I'd be smashing. I think her pals at Diageo would warn her away from me and say, no, it's not safe. There be dragons. But I think it would be smashing to have somebody like Maureen on, absolutely. Which year was the current Springbank 10-year-old launched? The current one that we enjoy today. Was it A, 1980, B, 1990, or C, 2000? A, 1980, B, 1990, or C, 2000? This should be easy, no?
I would have thought so. I've gone for one that I thought was the obvious one, but I've not seen it come. There it is. Oh, wait, it's actually pretty varied in the chat.
Yeah. It does. The wheels start to wobble a wee bit on the back nine, as you come up to use a golf analogy. But on the second half of the quiz, things should get a wee bit trickier. The reason I put this in is because I was quite struck by this. I was like, oh, that's interesting. Which year was Springbank's current iconic 10-year-old launched? So what would you go with?
I genuinely went for C.
2000. Well, it's a pretty good answer to put forward because Springbank was closed in 1980. Now, that doesn't preclude them from launching a product, right? There's mature stocks available even if the distillery is silent. They were only a year up and running again in 1990. And interestingly, they had a 10-year-old Longrow, but they didn't launch the 10-year-old Springbank until, quite rightly, Stuart,
I thought you were going to say, it's a good answer, but it's wrong.
Yeah, I was, Captain Bamus is saying, got to be C, no question mark. Most of the lounge did actually guess C, which I think is interesting. I felt like the Springbank 10 was out there longer, but then you consider, I don't really remember seeing 90s or 80s labeled Springbank 10.
I had no idea. Again, it was a guess, but it was just assumed it would be, it's 22 years, right?
Yeah. Oh, I suppose that's the thing. 2000 seems very recent to me, but yeah, in 2000 you were in primary school.
I was 7.
Yeah. Jimmy Legg is saying, I didn't guess. Question 8. How many Scotch malt distilleries were founded in 1990?
Founded, not existing.
No, founded. How many brand new Scotch malt distilleries were opened in 1990? How many were founded in 1990?
That's a great question. But I mean, you could throw any year in there, it'd be a good question. But depending on the
Yeah,
answer.
well, specifically,
There we go.
yeah, A, none, absolutely 0. B, 1. C, 2.
Right.
Sugar Kitty is saying it feels longer, but then you realise it's not really that long ago. Well, Sugar Kitty, unless you're Stuart, and it's almost all your lifetime ago. But absolutely, I get where you're coming from, and I agree with you. Blackfin is saying I was guessing late 90s for Springbank 10, so rounded up. Good for you. 7 out of 7 he's scored. He's on a full house. What would you go for here? How many Scotch malt distilleries do you think were founded in 1990?
I was just laughing at Billy Abbott saying, there we go, the same time as me is, there's the interesting answer. You know, if it was like, 9, 10, 11, it would have been a bit different, but none,
Yeah.
1 and 2.
Yeah.
I said none.
None. Of course, because we know that the famous story of just a distillery close. And I guess the first kind of new distillery to be celebrated, to be brought back in again, is Arran in 1995.
And it was also that vodka age, right? Whiskey was on an arguable decline. And again, please correct me if I'm wrong, it was that kind of era, right?
That's right. But we forget about Kinninvie and Speyside. Yeah, it's incredible Speyside was decades in the building. It took ages for that to come around. So by the time it eventually opened in 1990, it was kind of like it was just one of these kind of long-term things. Kinninvie was like a bolt on to Balvenie, essentially, to keep up with the whiskey needed for blends. And now it's adapted and it's kind of a skunk works distillery now. But of course, those two distilleries came on stream in 1990. The banana skin tripped you up there, Stuart. That banana skin icon was there to kind of prompt you to suggest that it might be a tricky question. Question 9, second from last. Which of these brands are made at the Clear Creek Distillery in Portland, Oregon? This would be a tricky one for you, buddy, no doubt. Yeah. This has gone outside your comfort zone. But one of these brands are made at Clear Creek Distillery in Portland, Oregon. Is it A, Gariana, B, Diamond Peak, or C, McCarthy's? I got to try one last week, and I was quite struck by it. I found it to be quite enjoyable. Scotch in spirit, I would have to say, but not in flavour.
No idea.
You're guessing. Throw a dart.
I know, absolutely. I'm guessing. I'm not going to say anything just yet. I mean, not that I'm swaying anyone. I've literally said.
No, if you're guessing, just go with it. Just go.
Yeah, I've said B, Diamond Peak.
Diamond Peak. Clear Creek Distillery. As far as I'm aware, it doesn't appear in the Malt Whisky Yearbook, this one. But they actually make, and I believe they were responsible for the first ever single malt to be produced and widely marketed in North America, and it is McCarthy's. McCarthy's. Gariana is made by Westland using Gariana oak, which is, I think, in Seattle.
Someone said Seattle in the...
Yeah, and Diamond Peak is Stranahan's. So it was McCarthy's that I was looking for. So there we are. We've only got the asshat question to go. Let's see what the scores are doing. I think you've done all right, though. You're on 6 out of 9. Yeah, so you've already got your pass mark. You're clear. So even if you have to guess the last one, you're in good shape. No problem at all. Gordon Dundas is saying 5 out of 9 passed. Yeah, beauty. It's superb to see people just relieved to get over often I play this as a participant and get other folk on, Menno or Shayla or other people to host it for me. And it is stressful. You do just want to get past that 5 out of 9. Too Slow Rob is on 8. Andrew Pear's on 7, Peter Box, Thomas Elmer, Bruno Martins, and Andrew Butler on 8 tonight. Molasses Mike as well. Gabriel Welding on 9 out of 10. Gabriel, you're holding on for your 10 out of 10 tonight. Along with Helen. Hellswood is on 9 out of 9. Wow, Whiskey with Molly is on 8 out of 9. Any other 9 out of 9s that I can pick up? I'm looking for something.
Billy Abbott, but we don't need to talk about that. He's just showing off.
Is Billy on a 9 out of 9? Well, do you know what's good about that? The chances are that I've got the questions reasonably right. So I'm not worried about what Billy scores. I'm more worried about Billy picking me up on making a mistake when I'm putting the quiz together, right? And David Brody is celebrating being still on 2 out of 9. Billy, as long as you're here and enjoying it, I don't care what your score is, my friend. Sugar Kitty's on 8 out of 9 as well. superb, but there's a couple. Alistair McPhail's on 9 out of 9, and he's saying that he's guessed the last two. Let's see if you can keep the luck going. The ASAT question at the end is an ASAT. I apologise. The combined theoretical LPA, that's litres of pure alcohol, of capacity for Inverhouse distilleries approximately equals what? That's all 5: Balmainach, Balblair, Old Pulteney, Knockdhu, and Speyburn. If you combine the LPA of all those distilleries, it approximately equals what? A, the theoretical LPA of Macallan, B, the theoretical LPA of Balvenie, or C, the theoretical LPA of Kalila and Glenmorangie combined.
I'm sitting here writing down numbers. Going right.
But that's why it's an ASAT. You don't just need to know the 5 capacities of Inverhouse. You also need to know what I'm comparing it to. It's deliberately meant to be frustratingly obtuse.
Adding up, right? Carry the one. This is fine, right? Go, got it.
Right, yeah. And you end up having to just throw a dart. This is going to have people upset at me. Look at Stuart's face, says Jimmy Legg. He's just like, what the hell? Absolutely. Billy Abbott is saying best question ever. Billy, there's been some ASAT questions to pip that. Believe me, not all of them created by me. Jimmy Legg is saying B is a great guess. And Captain Bamis is saying, I'm already upset. And Ian Bruce is saying I had numbers rattling around my head. Let's have your best educated guess based on your number jotting and carrying the one. What would you say, Stuart?
I mean, Macallan. I've gone with A. I've gone with A. Collective LOA. I've gone with A.
A. I have to say that Hoyt, Whiskey with Molly, Hell's Wood, Anthony Lambert, Bruno Martins, Willie Dollier. Good to see you in, Willie. Good to see you, Willie. James DeGiulio, Robert G, Tom Elmer, and Fernando James Morgan, as well as others, are correct with C.
Congratulations.
Kalila, 6.5 million. Theoretical capacity, Glenmorangie, 6.5 million, not including the Lighthouse project. It's very small anyway. But the two of them together is about 13 million litres, which is exactly the combined theoretical LPA of all the Inverhouse distilleries. If we look at the others, Macallan was 15 million litres theoretical. It's not necessarily what they're running at. And Balvenie is actually only about half that, about 7 million litres.
I'm upset, boy. I'm upset.
Yeah. Is there anybody that's managed to hang on? Hell's Wood is celebrating a 10 out of 10. Fantastic. Well, woohoo. Tom Elmer is celebrating a 9 out of 10. The Whiskeyographer is on an 8 out of 10. Fantastic score. Bruno Martins, a 9 out of 10. The banana skin got him. Whiskey with Molly on a 9. Almost there, Ben, almost there. Jimmy Legg is saying, it was so clear that Stuart was writing down numbers. Then he looked up to see that the answer wasn't a number. His face was priceless.
I can show you this scribbles I've got. It's just the numbers that I was writing down on the right-hand side here.
Yeah, terrific. Terrific. Jimmy Legg, thank you for the drama and thank you for the observation. I'll check that on replay to catch his face. That's exactly the purpose of the ASAT question as well. Gabriel Welding, 9 out of 10, every single quiz. Gabriel, I'm so sorry. I hope it doesn't put you off. Please keep coming back. You will manage that 10 out of 10. Sorry, Gabriel. Gabriel, I got a chance to hang out with a wee bit at the start of this year as well. It was a pleasure to hang out with you, buddy. You will get your 10 out of 10. Let's see what Billy did. 9 out of 10. He slipped up on the ASAT at the end, no doubt. So it was only Helen that takes the laurels tonight. Helen, well done. I think you're the only one to snag a 10 out of 10 tonight. And I'll be honest that while it started out pretty comfortable, it quickly, well done.
Well done.
Quickly, the wheels got a wee bit wobbly. I think this is an interesting topic. I think it's interesting to get folk like you that love their job, love being about it, love drinking the whiskey, love exploring, they love getting their curious side on. You're, like we mentioned, you're not even hit 30 yet. There's a long way for you to go in life, let alone your whiskey journey. But you're about it, you're impassioned about it, you're about education. But you're not speaking about education from learning from somebody else. You're speaking about education from hanging out with us, talking to us, drinking with us, and exploring with us. There's hundreds of folk like you out there in the industry. And just the fact that they sell whiskey for a living doesn't preclude them from joining the vPub, right? come on and talk about what you like to drink and what floats your boat.
I would comfortably say that I know probably the least on this whole conversation with everyone that's in the chat and yourself included. I genuinely probably know the least. It's, you know, when you work with specific distilleries, you get to know them very intimately, but as a wide grasp, it's still very much I'm still just very much a whiskey fan and a whiskey lover, right? You know, it's just I want to try these different things, but the intimate knowledge is a very different thing.
And what you have been able to do tonight is bring us insight and knowledge about your own products and about the things that you brought along to share as well. And so much of whiskey in this journey is not listening and receiving and downloading. So much of it is about sharing and an information exchange. That's just what it's all about. Everybody can learn something from everybody they meet, whatever situation that they're in. Helen is pointing out that Willie Dolier, or Uncle Willie, as we call him, also scored a 10 out of 10 tonight. And I think he's not in celebrating it because he's got his top off and he's running up and down the street in Helensburgh celebrating. Yeah, it's amazing. So let's raise a glass to Helen and to Uncle Willie Dolier as well for the 10 out of 10s. Well done, guys.
Well
done. Buddy, don't sign off. Don't disappear. Let me run the credits and things like that, and I'll say thank you and raise a glass for you after the credits roll. But as far as guinea pigs go, thank you so much. I mean, honestly, thank you. It's just, you know, these kind of whimsical ideas that I have, it doesn't really matter. It's just about teasing out the conversation. It's just teasing out the things that we like to talk about around whiskey, and for that, you've been exemplary this evening, Stuart. It's the second time that you've been on. I hope it's not the last time. I hope you've enjoyed staying up late with us tonight, buddy. I really do. Loved it. Good.
Oh no, Jeremy, I always love it. It's the conversation with yourself, but obviously the vPub's great fun, and it's surrounding yourself with people that genuinely love whiskey, and that's honestly, it's a conversation worth having every time.
Sorry, I'm not being humble there. I've got a midgie and it's flown into the room. It's because it's warm and clammy. I've left my window open tonight and the bugs are flying in now, so we need to wind up. Helen is saying, great to be able to hang out in the vPub and looking forward to Sunday for another. Great guest and Stuart, very honest, which is fabulous. Jerry Miller is saying, thanks, Roy and Stuart. Thanks, Helen. Thanks, Jerry. Alistair McPhail is saying, great vPub. It was nice to be able to join live. It's not always nice to have you. I don't know where you are, Addis Ababa or something just now, Alistair. Thomas Elmer is saying, as guinea pigs go, you really ran that wheel. Terrific, Tom. Ian Bruce is saying, thanks, Roy, Stuart, and the vPub community. Thanks to you for your time tonight and your input, Ian. It was wonderful to have you. Andrew's saying, Stuart needs to have a word and get an Aquavita single cask ex-bourbon AnCnoc arranged. Yeah, you need to have a word, yeah. Captain Bamis is saying, great one to come back to a live one for. Passed the quiz too. Missed you all last week. I missed you all too, Captain. It was nice to have you in, buddy. And Anthony Lambert is saying, really enjoyed this evening. Thanks for the Speyburn 18 tip, Roy. We'll be ordering a bottle. All the best to everyone. It was good to be back live. Gute Nacht. Nos da. Not good enough. I can go with Nosta. I need to ask my German friends what that means, but it's nice to have you in as always. Anthony and Whiskey with Molly Bennett saying, see you Monday, Roy, at our distillery visit. I hope so. I'm still trying to arrange the childcare for it, but if it can happen, I'll be there. In the meantime, I'll see all my patrons on Sunday night for a lock-in, and I'll just say, Stuart, thank you so much for your indulgence, your trust, and your information. Cheers, buddy. Thank you.
Yes. Pleasure.
I'll see you backstage. Wonderful stuff. Absolutely loved it. I genuinely did miss it the 2 weeks that I was away. It's great to come back and have a really relaxed hangout with everybody tonight. It's nice to see folk from the industry and as well as the regular beautiful whiskey folk and dedicated barflies and everybody just kind of getting along and enjoying that long form, not condensed, not rapid fire, just as whiskey would have it, don't you think? Whiskey content. Wonderful stuff. I've enjoyed myself tonight more than I could have imagined. It's nice to, after a few nights away from whiskey, to get back into enjoying it again, and it's wonderful to be able to do it with you guys. I'm raising a glass of something that's gone very cloudy. I'm not sure what it is. Oh my goodness, I think it's the Huddart. I think it's the one I put the water in. I think I've put it there and forgotten about it. Fantastic. Jimmy Legacy, great guest. Real genuine whiskey man. I agree with you, Jimmy. And Whiskey Nose is saying cheers to you. Cool Running is in saying cheers, Roy. Another great live. See you next time. Thank you, Cool Running. And Andrew Butler is saying, is Nos da good night in Welsh? Oh, it could be. And Fernando's in Paraguay. And he's in here tonight. Fantastic night once again. Thanks, Aquavita, and everyone here. Thanks very much, Fernando. Thanks to you all. As always saying, I genuinely mean it. You're all very dearly loved. And I look forward to hanging out with you again next week. Until then, I'll drink this cloudy dram and say Slajava. Good night.